Chapter 1144. The woman in a gown in the corner, even though she was standing in a dim corner, could still be recognized as Feng Mingzhu from her figure and the bag in her hand. She said something to the waiter in the corner and then took out a bank card and placed it in the waiter's hand. Feng Mingzhu only looked at it for 2 or 3 seconds before her gaze changed, and she immediately rushed downstairs. However, she had already fallen in the bathroom yesterday and was then pressed to the ground by Mrs. Liu and beaten for a long time. She ran in a hurry, and the servant behind her who was supposed to help her did not keep up. Feng Mingzhu had just run down the stairs when she suddenly fell down 4 or 5 steps from the ground. She fell to the ground in a sorry state and let out a scream that attracted everyone's attention. The 2 elders of the Feng family, the elders of the Li family, and the servants of the Feng family present seemed to understand something when they saw her panic. They all looked in her direction in silence. Feng Mingzhu didn't seem to see everyone's gaze. When the servant hurriedly ran down to help her up, she struggled to stand up. Ignoring the pain in her leg, she pointed in the direction of the TV screen and sobbed. "Don't look. Li Nanheng is framing me. He has long wanted to get rid of the Feng family shackles. In order to break off with the Feng family, he can do anything. He is framing me." As she spoke, she ran over and spread her arms to block the TV screen. She turned her head with red eyes and looked at everyone's gaze. "Don't look, don't look." Originally, no one understood what Li Nanheng was going to show everyone. But Feng Mingzhu's extreme reaction made the 2 elders of the Feng family hesitate for a moment. They looked at her expression thoughtfully and guessed that their child might really be lying. They did not speak anymore. But now that the Li family was here and Li Nanheng had been called over from thousands of miles away, how could this matter be stopped? When the 2 elders of the Feng family frowned and looked at Feng Mingzhu in confusion, the elders of the Li family also saw something strange in her agitated expression and words. They immediately looked at Li Nanheng, who was standing coldly and quietly by the side, and then at the 2 elders of the Feng family sitting on the sofa. Since Nanheng said that there is a reason, now that we are all here, let's see what exactly is going on. "Don't look, don't look. Nanheng is framing me." Feng Mingzhu looked at Captain Li helplessly with red eyes. "Grandpa Li, believe me. You have to believe me." Sitting in the wheelchair, Grandfather Li glanced at her. After a few seconds of silence, he said, "Miss Feng, you're too emotional. Sit aside and take a rest. Let's see how it goes." Grandpa Li. However, as soon as Old Master Li said this, everyone knew that it was impossible not to play the video on the screen. The helper also walked up and pulled Feng Mingzhu away. "Miss, don't be too agitated." Feng Mingzhu was stunned. "Let me go, don't look." "Don't look." Feng Mingzhu was pulled to the side, and everyone's eyes turned to the TV screen again. After taking the card from Feng Mingzhu, the waiter nodded and turned to leave. Then the screens switched to another scene. All the scenes changed to the places where Feng Mingzhu appeared later. After coming out of the corner, Feng Mingzhu did not enter the banquet hall again, but went straight to a special lounge above the banquet hall. In the surveillance camera above the corridor, she looked around before entering the room and then pushed the door open and entered the room. After that, the camera didn't change again, but stayed in the corridor. During this period, the waiting time was accelerated, but the surveillance time displayed on the upper right corner could be seen. Less than half an hour later, the waiter appeared in the corridor with a bald man with a beer belly and directly helped the man into the room where Feng Mingzhu was. The room the camera was shooting was outside Feng Mingzhu's room. The waiter was obviously the one who had received money half an hour ago, the one who was bribed by Feng Mingzhu herself. Li Nanheng was not seen in the whole process, and this video was enough to let everyone know that no matter what happened, Feng Mingzhu was the one who made the decision and no one set her up. Feng Mingzhu also looked at the process on the screen and suddenly realized what she had experienced. She turned her red eyes to look at Li Nanheng, but the man didn't even look at her. Feng Mingzhu clenched her fists tightly and bit her lips. At this moment, she couldn't say a word. The fear and despair in her heart had already spread to the top of her head. "Miss," the servant, who was standing next to her, felt her body was cold and trembling. She called out to her worriedly and fearfully. The surveillance video on the TV screen was still playing. After the man was helped into the room and the waiter quietly left, the camera switched to the scene where the waiter handed over the bank card. The bank card on the screen was enlarged. Others might not recognize it, but the Feng family recognized it. The pink card indeed belonged to Feng Mingzhu. It was a small card that she usually used, but because the Feng family had a high status in Los Angeles, they also had a certain status in the bank, so the Feng family's bank card would have some special marks that they recognized. Then, the camera switched back to the door of Feng Mingzhu's room. Suddenly, the door was opened, and the scene of Feng Mingzhu hurriedly running out in a bath towel appeared in everyone's eyes. The two elders of the Feng family and the elders of the Li family frowned when they saw her bare shoulders. They were considering whether to continue watching, but at this moment, they saw Li Nanheng's figure finally appear in the camera, but he was just standing outside the corridor. This matter clearly had nothing to do with him from the beginning, but why did he appear outside later? This puzzled everyone, so they continued watching. The more exciting scene was what happened after Mrs. Liu rushed up. It was not until the bath towel on Feng Mingzhu's body was suddenly stripped off that the elders suddenly closed their eyes. At this moment, Grandfather Feng slapped the coffee table heavily. "Enough! Don't play anymore." Hearing her grandfather's angry shout, Feng Mingzhu's almost frozen body stiffened as she watched the nightmarish surveillance video. She looked at Grandfather Feng weakly. Chapter 1145. I was wondering what had happened. Why would I suddenly be sent back to the United States overnight? And why did the police send me the documents of intentional assault? My family and I were all confused. In the end, Mingzhu, what else do you want to say now? Grandfather Feng was furious, but because this shameful matter was clearly seen by everyone in the Li family, even if he was angry, he could only barely maintain his rationality. He said angrily, "You said it was Nanheng who set me up. He was the one who forced me into a corner and ruined my reputation. You said that Nanheng set me up so that I can't get married in the future? Tell me, what's that in the surveillance video?" Feng Mingzhu opened her mouth and was about to speak when Nanheng said coldly, "Miss Feng, you even used the means of suicide and forced everyone in the Li family to come here. Now you have to give me a reason. Otherwise, do you think it's so easy to get rid of the old men of the Li family? I'm afraid it's easier to invite the devil and then to send the devil away." Feng Mingzhu's expression trembled. She turned to look at the elders and saw that they were all deep in thought. Obviously, they had already guessed some clues about this matter, but they couldn't make a complete conclusion, so they looked at her suspiciously. Mingzhu, things have already escalated to the point of suicide. What exactly is going on? Now, that Nanheng is also here, this surveillance video, we've all seen it. Things have gotten so out of hand, there's really no way to let it go. At this time, fourth elderly looked at Feng Mingzhu. "Why do I look at the content of this surveillance video? It seems that you bribed the waiter and asked him to do something for you. Did you take a fancy to that big-bellied bald man?" "I didn't." At the mention of CEO Liu, Feng Mingzhu was so disgusted that she had goosebumps all over her body. "That's a misunderstanding." When she said the word misunderstanding, her voice became slightly weaker. She was about to explain, but when she noticed the cold and indifferent gaze that Nanheng sent her, she felt that all the blood in her body was chilled to the bones. She didn't even have a chance to lie or defend herself. This man really didn't intend to save her any face. Feng Mingzhu bit her lip and turned to look at Li Nanheng. Her eyes were red as she said, "Nanheng, must you kill him like this?" Li Nanheng didn't move his brows. He didn't look at her red eyes and just said indifferently, "Before Miss Feng committed suicide, I was still in China and didn't seem to have any intention of returning to the United States to pursue the matter. Who made things so public? Was it me?" Feng Mingzhu. She seemed to have choked for a moment. She opened her mouth, but couldn't say a word for a long time. He was the one who beat her at her own game and caused her to be in this state. She cried and threw a tantrum for a reason, but he was the cause of the whole thing. Even if she was unwilling, it seemed that she really couldn't refute him. But Li Nanheng had used this matter to force her to this step. She refused to believe that he hadn't predicted that things would escalate to this point. He clearly knew that she would be sent back to the Huaxia Empire. He clearly knew what would happen next. That was why he had even obtained the surveillance footage of Mr. Kai's home. He had never intended to give her any face. But that was right. He didn't seem to have any feelings for her. Finally understanding the cold-blooded and heartless nature of this man, Feng Mingzhu gripped her sleeves tightly. Her face, which was still red and swollen from the beating, was now completely pale. Mingzhu, what exactly is going on? Old Madame Feng sat on the sofa as though she couldn't take the blow. She looked at her and asked, "Did you really bribe that waiter?" I. Feng Mingzhu choked. "Grandma, since Miss Feng can't say anything else aside from wanting to commit suicide and crying that she couldn't get married, then I can only be rude to you too." As Li Nanheng spoke, he transferred a test report from his phone to the television screen. "This is a drug that Miss Feng gave to that waiter last night. It can be mixed into alcohol. Everyone can see the contents of this drug." Everyone turned to the screen again. When they saw the words "India exports aphrodisiac, 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 aphrodisiac," and so on, they instantly frowned in disbelief. This is in Miss Feng's hands. "Miss Feng, do you still need me to continue to explain the situation?" Li Nanheng asked lightly. It sounded like a question, but the man's tone was clearly mocking. Feng Mingzhu suddenly turned to look at him. "Yes, it was me who wanted to drug you. I wanted to have sex with you. So after realizing it, you treated me in this way? You clearly know that my heart has been with you for so many years, and I just like you. No matter what methods I use, I will be the one to suffer losses in this kind of thing. Yet, you beat me at my own game and made me lose face." What? She was using this to drug Li Nanheng? This realization shocked everyone. The elders of the Li family looked at each other without saying anything, but the two elders of the Feng family were so angry that their faces instantly turned green. "Bastard!" Grandfather Feng suddenly said angrily. "Mingzhu, do you know what shame is? Nanheng is still your brother-in-law in name. How dare you? What the hell, brother-in-law? Do I have a sister?" Feng Mingzhu was really provoked. She went home and made a scene, thinking that she could fight for something. Now that things had come to this point, she simply said, "My sister is long dead. A 1-year-old baby, a cenotaph. You're really old and muddle-headed. Are you willing to let Li Nanheng marry her cenotaph?" "I don't have a sister. Brother-in-law, this so-called relationship is all empty in my eyes. I only know that I like him. I liked him many years ago, but in the end, he didn't care about my face and would rather marry a dead soul than look at me. He forced me to this point, and now the 3-year agreement is up. What kind of brother-in-law is he?" Grandfather Feng was about to scold, but he was so angry that he couldn't speak. He coughed violently and raised his hand to point at her. He pointed at her for a long time, but couldn't say a word. Feng Mingzhu said with red eyes, "When the Li family said that they wanted to marry that cenotaph, you only wanted to maintain the relationship between the two families. You only thought that even if it was just a cenotaph, you could at least give my dead sister a home. But did you think about me? I like him so much, and you want me to call him brother-in-law? I can't do it." Chapter 1146. Even if you can do it, you can't do such a thing. You like Nanheng, but it doesn't mean that he has to accept you. Old Madame Feng stroked her husband's chest and turned back to reprimand him in a warm and angry voice. "You've never had a good attitude toward your sister since you were young. Even when we burned some joss paper money for her aunts at festivals, you didn't like it and smashed things in the room in anger. We're used to this, but hearing these words, our hearts are really cold." "Huh?" Feng Mingzhu sneered. "Do you really treat Nanheng as one of your own? Look at him. I just gave him a cup of medicine, and he used this method to ruin my reputation. Has he ever considered your feelings? Has he ever considered the face of the Feng family and the Li family?" Miss Feng, second elderly, frowned and said, "The cause of this matter seems to be you. There's no need to push the responsibility to Nanheng. We all saw the whole process. Although Nanheng did not show any mercy, he seemed to be shameless first. Besides, everyone has a bottom line. Anyone would be angry about something like drugging someone. Nanheng is just giving them a taste of their own medicine. He's standing in a passive position. He only knows how to blame others for not showing mercy, but he didn't reflect on himself. Did you call us here just to listen to a person who did something wrong accuse others of not showing mercy? When Feng Mingzhu suddenly heard Second Elder Li's words, she couldn't argue back. Her face alternated between red and white. Nanheng coldly curved his lips. The biggest mistake Feng Mingzhu made was to bring the elders of the Li family here. The biggest weakness of the 4 elders of the Li family was the Li family's face. Anyone who hurt the Li family's face was going against them. If this matter was really the Li family's fault, they could only swallow their pride and apologize. But now the truth was here. Instead, Feng Mingzhu was slandering them and threatening to kill herself. This matter had come to this point. She had dragged herself into a dead end. It was really a move for herself, a very fatal move. Clearly, she had also suddenly realized the current situation. Feng Mingzhu's face was pale, but she didn't dare to yell with righteous indignation anymore. She only said aggrievedly, "If that's the case, then Nanheng's meaning also represents the Li family's meaning? From the beginning, he didn't care about marrying my sister's cenotaph, but because of the agreement, he wanted to pretend to be a gentleman who kept his word, so he had to marry her, but in fact he despised her. Now I think he must have someone else in his heart, and he couldn't wait to end this relationship with the Feng family as soon as possible. Now it's the 3rd anniversary. Li Nanheng, you came back not only because of me, but more importantly, to sever this marriage relationship with the Feng family, right? You want the Feng family to be free so that you can be with the person you like?" Old Master Li, who had been sitting in the wheelchair for a long time, suddenly said, "I always thought that Mingzhu was a good child. I didn't expect such a thing to happen." Hearing Mr. Li's words, everyone fell silent, and Feng Mingzhu looked at him with red eyes. Mr. Li said coldly, "In this case, the Feng family has told you about the expiration of the 3-year agreement, and Mingzhu has also made this matter difficult for the 2 families. After midnight yesterday, the marriage between Nanheng and second Miss Feng will be over. If we want to end this relationship, it's up to us. Now I agree to end it. What do you think, Mr. Feng?" When Elder Li said this, his tone was very cold. Obviously, he was also angry in his heart. It was only because he was the head of the family that he didn't directly say anything too harsh. However, his meaning was already very clear. He wanted to break up all the relationships between them and return peace to the Li family. Before Mr. Feng spoke, Feng Mingzhu sneered. "See, I'm right? The Li family didn't welcome my sister who died early from the beginning, and you insisted on marrying her cenotaph. It's really ridiculous. They didn't take that cenotaph seriously at all." Just when the elders frowned unhappily because of her words, Nanheng said indifferently, "It's true that there is no relationship between me and Miss Feng. You all saw the dispute in T-City last night. I don't want to explain this kind of thing anymore, but I really want to persuade Mr. and Mrs. Feng to discipline the drill master's granddaughter. Don't take things she likes as her own. I've never been interested in Miss Feng. She deserved the drug. I just beat her at her own game. If she didn't take the lead, she wouldn't have been disgraced. After today, even if she commits suicide, it has nothing to do with the Li family." It was rare to hear Li Nanheng speak so much all of a sudden. Furthermore, from his tone, which had always been unruly, it seemed that he had no intention of breaking up with them. Instead, he was polite, reasonable, and somewhat respectful. They could tell that he had something else to say, so no one interrupted him. In addition, Miss Feng has another conclusion. I have to seriously refute it. The elders of the Li family are all here now. They feel ashamed of what she did, so they said to end the relationship. But I think Mr. and Mrs. Feng should know whether the Li family treats Miss Feng's cenotaph kindly or not. The Li family has long buried Miss Feng's cenotaph in their own place and has long accepted her as their family. Li Nanheng said lightly, "What happened today is just a small episode because of Miss Feng's accidental mistake. There's no need to make it too complicated. In order not to affect the relationship between the 2 families in the Chinese community of Los Angeles, I am willing to continue to marry Miss Feng. In order to show my sincerity, I will never marry another woman." Never marry another woman? Everyone in the room was stunned by Li Nanheng's serious and dignified words. The two elders of the Feng family instantly felt a little better, but they still looked at him in disbelief. At this time, the elders of the Li family looked terrible, and Mr. Li said angrily, "Nanheng, what do you mean by never marry another woman? Even if our Li family cherishes that child's cenotaph very much, it's expired now. Why do you want to renew it? Why don't you marry another woman?" Feng Mingzhu was also shocked. It was not good to be slapped in the face again and again. At this moment, she stood there in disbelief, thinking that she had heard wrong. Nanheng this. Mr. and Mrs. Feng stood up at this time. "If you take back what you said just now, we won't mind. After all, this time, it was our Feng family's fault." Chapter 1147. People like Li Nanheng had always been arrogant and unruly. Even the four stubborn old men of the Li family couldn't deal with a junior like him, not to mention the Feng family who had never been too aggressive in handling matters. Although the family had a strong presence in Los Angeles, most of the elders and managers in the family were not particularly domineering. They were very reasonable. They knew that their granddaughter was in the wrong in this matter, so they did not intend to force her. However, they did not expect that Li Nanheng, who had never followed the rules, would be the first to stand up for the relationship between the two families and even make such a vow. The Li family only had this one grandson. Never marry another. The two elders of the Feng family turned to look at the elders of the Li family, only to see that they were so angry that they did not want to say a word, especially the eldest of the Li family, Li Nanheng's grandfather. He sat in a wheelchair and stared at Li Nanheng with an ugly expression. However, this was not the Li family's home, so he endured it and said, "All right, today's matter is the fault of these young people who are not sensible and cause trouble. Mingzhu, let's leave it at that. After all, we did not hurt each other and did not make any big mistakes. These juniors don't need to keep their words. Let's go back first." "You didn't make a big mistake?" Feng Mingzhu took the opportunity to interrupt. "I was sent back to the country by T-City's police on the charge of intentional assault and was surrounded by a crowd at Mr. Kai's house. My reputation has been ruined." "Enough, Mingzhu!" Elder Feng suddenly shouted angrily. "Didn't you ask for it?" Feng Mingzhu paused and pursed her lips. She turned to look at Li Nanheng. However, Li Nanheng acted as though he did not hear her nagging and continued the previous topic. He said calmly, "I will keep my words. However, now that something like this has happened to the Feng family, it is indeed inappropriate for the Li family to stay here. It is better to discuss this matter behind closed doors. This Li will send the elders back first. Elders, farewell." The two elders of the Feng family nodded. Alas, now Mingzhu's parents were not at home. Otherwise, with Mingzhu's father's temper and Mrs. Feng's temper, they would be even angrier now. If Mingzhu was here, she would be beaten to a pulp by her own father. Seeing that Li Nanheng gave the helper an indifferent look, someone immediately supported the other three elders of the Li family and pushed Grandfather Li, who was sitting in a wheelchair, out. When the elders all went out and were helped into the car, Feng Mingzhu suddenly turned and ran out despite the obstruction of her family and servants. She staggered to Li Nanheng's back, raised her hand, and grabbed a corner of his clothes. Nanheng. After Li Nanheng went out, he was no longer as kind and respectful as he was in front of the two elders of the Feng family. Instead, his eyes were cold, and he glanced back coldly. "Let go. Nanheng, I know you're still brooding over what I've done. It's fine if you don't like me. I now completely believe that you really won't be with me. But is there a need for you to be so ruthless towards me? We grew up together after all. Can't you feel sorry for me and let me go? Why? Why must you force me to this point?" As she spoke, she gripped tightly onto his clothes. Her eyes were filled with hatred and unwillingness, but most of it was confusion. She knew Li Nanheng's character. This man was indifferent to many things. She couldn't understand why he could fight back so fiercely against a glass of drug wine. Li Nanheng's expression remained unchanged, and his eyes were still cold. He reached back and mercilessly pulled the corner of his shirt out of her hand. At the same time, he said lightly, "When Feng Ling was humiliated in public and driven out of the base, she was a lonely orphan without a family. Who felt sorry for her?" As soon as he finished speaking, Feng Mingzhu's face instantly turned pale, and the man coldly glanced at her. Did you feel sorry for her for me? Feng Mingzhu. The man opened the door and got into the car. Without giving her a chance to speak, he started the engine and the tall, black Hummer roared away. Feng Mingzhu turned to look at the car in disbelief. It was because of Feng Ling again. Since his feelings for Feng Ling were so deep, why didn't he just marry her? Why didn't he just marry her? Why did he say that he would never marry another woman in his life? Why didn't he just marry her? Why did he say that he would never marry another woman? Just as Feng Mingzhu was absent-minded because of some suspicious points, her footsteps were a little weak as she walked back to the villa. The moment she reached the villa, the door opened. She stepped in and was slapped heavily in the face. Feng Mingzhu's figure froze at the entrance of the Feng family. She looked in disbelief at Grandfather Feng, whose expression was extremely ugly. Grandpa! Feng Mingzhu seemed to be stunned. She stood there for a long time and covered her face with her hands. You're really a good daughter raised by our Feng family. Even if you knew that your family doted on and regretted your poor sister who died early, at least you've been educated and educated by your family since you were a child. But why are you always unwilling to accept this? Now you even want to snatch a man. Back then, Li Nanheng had already rejected you. How can you use such a dirty method to get a man? Are you shameless? Feng Mingzhu's hands gradually clenched into fists, and her eyes were suddenly filled with tears. The moment the tears fell, she suddenly roared. If you didn't agree to let him marry that cenotaph, everything wouldn't have come to this point. Aren't you just reluctant to part with that child who died early? But she still died. She will never come back. Speaking of this, Feng Mingzhu glared at him hatefully with her red eyes and said, She just can't come back. She's dead. She has been fed to the fish in the sea, and not even her bones are left. Even if Nanheng really wants to maintain his **T marriage with her, she is just a dead soul. How ridiculous! A group of people is wasting their feelings on a dead person who has long disappeared. Pa! Another heavy slap. This time, Grandfather Feng was really ruthless. As he slapped her, he was so angry that he raised his hand to his chest and almost couldn't breathe. Feng Mingzhu's already scarred face was now covered with a clear finger mark, and the blood coming out of the corner of her mouth made her face even more frighteningly pale. 4M. Chapter 1148. Old man, don't be angry. Your heart can't take it. Grandma Feng hurriedly came over and grabbed his hand when he was about to slap her again. No matter what Mingzhu did wrong, she is still our child. You can't hit her so hard. I just slapped her twice to teach her a lesson and let her know what shame is. I didn't use the family law, Grandfather Feng said angrily. Family law? Feng Mingzhu recalled that when she was very young, her parents had accidentally dropped her younger sister into the sea on a cruise. When they returned home and found out what had happened, they were so angry, hateful, and in pain that they had nowhere to vent their anger. In the end, they took out an old rattan and whipped her father's back. She remembered that at that time, he had been whipped until his back was bloody. It could be seen that everyone's heart was even more bloody than this. But so what? No matter how sad this group of people were for the sake of that early death. In the end, she was still an early death. Feng Mingzhu looked at them coldly and didn't say a word. She turned and let the servant help her up the stairs without looking back. The Li family. The car stopped. As soon as they entered the house, Grandfather Li said unhappily, "The rest of you can leave first. I have something to say to Nanheng." Logically speaking, after seeing them come back, Li Nanheng should not enter the door, but drive away to 11 base or go somewhere else. However, this time, he clearly did not intend to leave immediately. After all, they were grandfather and grandson, so they could see his purpose. They knew that Li Nanheng had something to say and came prepared. The servant sent the other 3 elders away until only Grandfather Li, who was sitting in a wheelchair, and Li Nanheng, who had just entered the door, were left in the front hall of the Li family. Tell me, I want to hear how you are going to explain to me about the vow that you will never marry again. What do you think? Old Master Li said, resisting the urge to smash the folding cane beside the wheelchair into his face. You're the only grandson of the Li family. We don't force you to give birth to a son before we have one. Even if it is a granddaughter, at least we can see our great-grandchildren. But you don't even plan to get married again. Are you deliberately making fun of us?" Hearing the old man's angry words, Li Nanheng calmly and coldly threw a stack of documents on the table beside him. Grandfather Li turned to see the sealed document, glanced at him suspiciously, and didn't ask more. He picked up the document and opened it. After pulling it out, he saw several DNA medical test reports. There were new and old blood comparison reports and hair DNA comparison reports. After reading it, he saw the name written at the bottom. Grandfather Li fell silent and was stunned for a long time before he suddenly raised his eyes to look at him. "This is Li Nanheng. These DNA comparison reports are not detailed enough. Feng Ling, who was cruelly driven out of 11 base by you and the other 3 elders, is the second Miss Feng who the Feng family thought died in the sea. She was lucky and didn't die. I guess she fell on some floating object on the sea and drifted to the coast and jungle closest to the sea. She was fed by wolves in the jungle and didn't come out until she was 5 years old. Because of the environment she lived in since she was a child, she only knew how to live. Later, she accidentally entered 11 base. She didn't have any extra thoughts or bad intentions. She just liked the environment there and wanted to live a good life in 11 base. You've seen all her hard work and achievements in the base for so many years. You know how seriously she lived. However, you still destroyed her way of life, trampled on her dignity and everything under your feet, drove her out, and forced her into a corner. Did you think that just 3 years ago today, I stood in the ancestral hall of the Li family and peeled an apple for her, but you tore everything she had into pieces and drove her out of the base? How is it possible?" Grandfather Li frowned in disbelief. "How could she? I didn't believe this kind of coincidence at first, but all the coincidences were implicated, so I went to collect her previous blood samples and sent them to compare with the newly collected blood samples and hair," Li Nanheng said coldly. Li Nanheng said coldly. In order to find this child miraculously, the Feng family left their DNA records and certificates in the DNA blood bank early on. After all kinds of comparisons, everything points to the only truth. Feng Ling is the second daughter of the Feng family, my wife, and your granddaughter-in-law. Grandfather Li clenched the thin but heavy pieces of paper in his hand. He recalled the day 3 years ago when he had gone to 11 base to kick Feng Mingzhu out of anger because of her instigation and exaggerated description. But if that girl was the second daughter of the Feng family, then Grandfather Li suddenly asked coldly, "You knew long ago that she was Feng Mingzhu's biological sister?" "I didn't know 3 years ago. I just found out recently." Li Nanheng answered frankly and did not lie at all. "Since you know, you can see that the Feng family is very guilty of missing this second daughter. Why didn't you tell them? Not even in front of the Feng family today." Feng Ling is used to living outside since she was a child. The Feng family's big mansion will only be a shackle to her. She is not willing to go back and acknowledge her. This layer of paper has not been pierced, and I will not ignore her own thoughts and reveal half a word to the Feng family. Li Nanheng said, "Whether she wants to go back or not is her own business. None of us has the right to help her push all this. If she wants to go back, she can stand in front of the Feng family's villa now. I can help her eliminate all the obstacles in front of the Feng family, including Feng Mingzhu. However, she doesn't want to go back." Old Master Li could understand this. When he saw Feng Ling lying on the ground in the base, although she was drunk, he could see that she was a girl with her own ideas and a very distinct personality. Although she was dressed in a boy's clothes and looked very handsome, she was still a girl. She could go through the wind and rain in 11 bays for so long without being discovered, which showed that she was a person with a tough personality. Such a person with such a personality could not be easily changed. Her own life plan could not be changed by any small episode. As long as she didn't want to, even if she was the president's daughter, she would rather be free outside. It was really difficult for ordinary people to deal with this kind of girl's personality. 4M. Chapter 1149. After all, the incident of driving Feng Ling out caused Li Nanheng to almost cut off contact with his family. If he hadn't been seriously ill this time, he would have been willing to come back. Otherwise, he would have lost this grandson. Grandfather Li thought for a moment and asked, "So what's your plan now?" "I don't have any plan. I just want to make an agreement with you." Sure enough, he came prepared. "What agreement? Tell me about it." Grandfather Li looked at him. Li Nanheng's tone was light but clear. "From now on, the Li family is not allowed to interfere with the relationship between Feng Ling and me, including whether she will stay in 11 base or not. You and the other 3 can't continue to be in charge of the family at your age, and you don't trust my cousins, so you insist that I come back. If you want me to completely take over the Li Corporation, I can, but the only condition is my marriage with Feng Ling." Grandfather Li understood the meaning of his words and frowned unhappily. "The Li Corporation is there. No matter how old you are still healthy and definitely have the ability to wait until I get married. If you want me to take over, wait until I officially marry Feng Ling." Grandfather Li instantly threw the stack of documents in his hand on the table. "How dare you threaten me?" Li Nanheng smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Compared to what you did to Feng Ling 3 years ago, I'm only threatening you with this matter now. No matter whether it is directly or indirectly, this matter is beneficial to you. Just by doing this, I've already left enough face and affection between us." You don't agree?" Li Nanheng looked at the angry grandfather and asked with a smile, not surprised at all. Seeing his confident look, Grandfather Li was even more angry and his face became gloomy. "You brat, you've laid out all kinds of conditions here. If Feng Ling is really that child of the Feng family, there's indeed no need for me to interfere. You've blocked all my words. Even if I don't agree, do you think I'll seek death like a girl?" Grandfather Li said angrily. Who would have thought that after so many years of nurturing by these crafty old foxes, this kid would not do anything other than fooling around when he returned home? But when he really wanted to be serious with someone, no one would be able to pull him back. Thinking back to how Feng Ling had fallen into the sea back then, even old men like them felt sorry for her. In addition, he drove her out of the base 3 years ago, and compared with all the things now, he did feel a little guilty. That child didn't die after falling into the sea, nor did she starve to death in the jungle. As a girl, she pretended to be a man and risked her life in 11 base. I think she's very tough. Our Li family is tough, so I don't mind if she's tough. But in my opinion, it won't be so easy for you to marry this girl. I don't like the girl who is easy to marry, and she's the only one who is not easy to marry. Li Nanheng suddenly chuckled. No matter what, she is my wife. She can't run away in this life. Old Master Li was so jealous that his teeth were about to fall off. Originally, he had only accepted it because he was threatened. Now, he rolled his eyes at him as if he couldn't bear it. If you have the ability, you can directly make the girl pregnant and bring back a child. If you have the ability to make the girl give me a grandson or granddaughter within a year, I will call you Grandpa. Li Nanheng sneered. You want to bet? Why? Can't I bet? Bet what? If you can give me a great-grandchild within a year, we won't interfere with your affairs in the future. But if you can't do it within a year, we don't care about Feng Ling's relationship. You can marry whoever you want, but you must be dismissed from 11 base after a year and go back to the Li Corporation. No matter how much you don't like to work in the business world, we still plan to leave 11 base to off Feng and the others. Stay away from those bullets in the future. Grandfather Li was trying to goad him into action. If Li Nanheng really got married and had children, he would restrain himself. At least, he would cherish his life. He would not rush into any dangerous mission without hesitation. He had to think about his wife and children. However, if he lost, the result would also be the same. After all, every path was a way that Grandfather Li hoped he could leave 11 base. That was just a place to train people, but not a place that Li Nanheng had been guarding with his life. How could Li Nanheng not see through Grandfather Li's intention? He just smiled and did not say much. He made a gesture of agreement to Grandfather Li, put his hands in his trouser pockets, and turned to walk out. However, as soon as he walked out of the Li family's house, he suddenly received a call from a bodyguard in T-City. Boss, when we were guarding near Feng Ling's residence today, we saw Mrs. Mo came to see her. Yes, what happened to Mrs. Mo? Jinwan was not dangerous at all. If there were no special circumstances, the bodyguard would not call so late at night. We saw Mrs. Imo go upstairs for a while and go downstairs soon after, and it seemed that she was in a hurry. After coming out, she went to a nearby pharmacy, bought some things, and quickly went back. The bodyguard paused and then said, "Later, our people went to the pharmacy and asked, only to know that Mrs. M.O. went to buy a box of emergency contraceptive pills." Li Nanheng was about to open the car door, but when he heard the words contraceptive pills, he suddenly stopped. His eyes narrowed. Jinwan and M.O. Jingshen were very attached to each other. They were legally married, and it was normal for them to have a child. It was impossible for them to have contraceptive pills. She went to see Feng Ling, ran out to buy it, and then went back. It went without saying who this medicine was for. Feeling that the pressure on the other side of the phone was a little cold, the bodyguard said cautiously, "We have been calling you, boss, but you were on the plane and couldn't get through after flying for more than 10 hours. It had been so long." The implication was that Feng Ling had had that medicine for more than 10 hours, and it was very likely that she had taken it. At the thought that the first thing Feng Ling did after he left was to take contraceptive pills, Li Nanheng's face darkened. When he left, although she was not fully awake, he had told her that there was an emergency, so he had to fly back to America. He did not leave her there alone after sleeping. When she woke up, did she think that he ran away after sleeping? So she angrily asked Jinwan to help her buy that kind of medicine. Contraceptive pills? Damn, if she dared to take that kind of medicine because of this inexplicable misunderstanding, he would fly over and kill her, and Jinwan who helped her buy the medicine. Chapter 1150. Now that he had returned to the United States, he had to go back to 11 Base to take a look. Even though Li Nanheng couldn't wait to fly back to T-City, it was already late at night, and the only direct flight from Los Angeles to T-City was at dawn, which was the earliest. If he used the base's helicopter because of this private matter, Feng Ling would probably take the contraceptive pill in front of him in anger, even if she didn't really take the contraceptive pill. Li Nanheng took a look at the time. At this time, Feng Ling should have gone to bed. She didn't sleep much last night and in the morning. No matter how strong she was, it was impossible for her to stay up at this time. He endured it, threw the phone into his pocket, and went back to 11 Base. In the base, he kicked Fatai, who was sleeping like a dead pig, awake, and asked him a few questions about what happened on Rogers Pass, as well as what happened after he had high fever and fainted, and Fatai forced him a drink. Although Fatai didn't have a deep impression of that incident, seeing Boss Lee's furious expression, he hurriedly tried to sort out his memories and answered every question Boss asked him. When Boss asked about Feng Ling's situation in the days after that day, Fatai just said that he really couldn't remember clearly, but it seemed that Feng Ling often lay down to sleep in those days. He rarely saw her lying down for so long, but she did seem to be in poor condition in those days. Li Nanheng didn't know he was not sober at that time and lost his mind. Besides, he had a high fever and drank a bottle of wine. She was young, and it was her first time, so it would be strange if she was in good condition. When he thought about how he couldn't recall that incident, and then thought about all the delays and hesitations he'd had in the past 3 years, he couldn't wait to ruthlessly punch himself in the head, so he directly punched Fatai in the head first. Boss, what are you doing? Go away." Li Nanheng looked at Fatty's sleepy expression. Fatai was still yawning even after being punched, so he couldn't be bothered to say more. "Oh, then I'll go back to sleep, boss." Fatai didn't understand why Boss suddenly punched him. It was a little painful, but fortunately it was not particularly painful, so he scratched his head and went back. Li Nanheng was about to go to the base hall. Suddenly, a hasty alarm sounded in the base. Li Nanheng, who had just picked up a cigarette and was about to put it in his mouth, paused and turned to look at the alarm in the base hall. He dropped the cigarette and walked over quickly. There were several types of alarms in 11 Base. The one that sounded just now was a special alarm. It was one of the alarms that would never sound unless something major happened. The red light on the top of the base hall also indicated the degree of emergency. Many members of the base were awakened by the alarm and hurriedly got out of bed to get ready. After getting dressed, they hurriedly went out and asked, "What happened?" This kind of alarm hasn't sounded for at least a few years. Did terrorists attack our base? A group of people asked until someone went to the base hall and returned. They finally got the answer. Something happened in Cambodia. A group of local Cambodian drug dealers, led by Akib and Dolly, captured the important members of 11 Base and their wives and children. They threatened the innocent women and children, contacted the leaders of 11 Base, and set up a heavy ambush in Cambodia. They wanted them to take Mr. NTRO, the think tank behind 11 Base, Mo Jingshan, as an exchange. If Mo Jingshan didn't show up in 3 days, they would throw those innocent women and children into the minefield and blow them to pieces. The Mo family had been in business for generations, and their family was also involved in politics. The Mo family's elder remembered that his ancestors had suffered greatly when they fought with the underworld. He had also learned from Mo Jingshan that he was involved in the underground arms trade, and had forced him to swear that he would never be involved in the underworld or stain his hands with blood. Indeed, Mo Jingshan did not need to be stained with blood. He already had a pair of hands that could turn the clouds and rain with a flip of the hand. To avoid suspicion, Ntro was the alias Mo Jingshan used when he was in the underground arms trade. Those people in the underworld knew his real name, but were used to calling him Mr. Ntro. The huge forces behind Akib and Dolly had long since been disintegrated. They were the branch that had escaped, a very ambitious branch. The few people who had escaped were the backbone of that group. So even if they were just a branch of a team, they had to be dealt with carefully. And now they directly kidnapped many innocent women and children, who were the families of many old members of 11 Base who had left 11 Base because of the old age. This matter attracted the absolute attention of 11 Base, and Lee Nanhung couldn't go to T-City now because of this matter. He had to go to Cambodia immediately. The news that something happened in Cambodia was directly passed to Phong Ling's ears the next day. Because the people Lee Nanhung left with her were all from 11 Base, they would soon know what had happened. And because they knew Phong Ling's existence and status in 11 Base, they didn't hide anything from her. At this time, if Lee Nanhung abandoned the things in the base and flew back to T-City immediately, Phong Ling would really be angry. What she was most concerned about now was Jean Wan. Mr. Mo seemed to have left early this morning. He probably wouldn't tell Ji and Wan the reason. She didn't know how the situation in Cambodia would develop, but she had been in contact with people like Akib and Dolly. They were very sinister and cunning, and more of them were vicious. Those people spoke the Khmer language of Cambodia every day, but every word and sentence was more poisonous than a poisonous snake, which made people shudder. Now she had to calm Jean Wan down first. Before she knew the situation, she couldn't let Jean Wan notice any clues. Before Mr. Mo left, he did send a message to her, asking her to stay with Jean Wan. Phong Ling rushed back to T University to accompany Jean Wan and stayed close to her. However, the news was still known by Jean Wan 3 days later. Moreover, when Jean Wan learned the news, a worse news had just been confirmed by all of them. Mr. Mo was missing. This was bad news for Jean Wan, but she was just puzzled at that time. She didn't even know the relationship between Mo Jingshan and 11 Base, or the relationship between him and those underground arms deals, let alone why he disappeared when he went to Cambodia to handle some affairs. She finally calmed Jean Wan down, or rather, because Jean Wan was strong enough, she calmed herself down and accompanied Jean Wan back to High City. Chapter 1151. Phong Ling thought that since she had experienced so many dangers in 11 Base, she should be able to stabilize Jean Wan's mood. But what she didn't expect was that Jean Wan was pregnant at this time. Phong Ling wanted to go to Cambodia to help because she learned that several of Dolly's snipers were good at shooting. After all, she used to be a member of 11 Base's sniper team. She called Kay, and Kay said she could go there, so she told him everything about Jean Wan. She was very anxious about Jean Wan's pregnancy and wanted Mr. Mo to come back safely as soon as possible. It didn't feel good to wait here all the time. She had the ability, so she just wanted to go to Cambodia to fight. However, what she didn't expect was that Jean Wan, a woman who had just become pregnant and who vomited every day when she felt uncomfortable, had the ability to avoid their sight and sneak onto the same plane as them for her husband. The plane landed in Cambodia, and Phong Ling was about to get off the plane when she saw Jean Wan. How could this be? Jean Wan was a pregnant woman. How could she appear in such a place? Phong Ling was very angry and annoyed that she failed to keep an eye on her, so she forced Jean Wan to take her away and help her book a flight back to High City. She could understand Jean Wan's mood. Jean Wan asked her if it were her, could she stay in High City at ease? The answer was, of course, no. No one could keep waiting like this with a clear conscience. She tried to persuade Jean Wan again and again, even though she knew that her words were useless. Jean Wan said, "But Mo Jingshun is here." Her voice was not high, but every word she said was firm. Just when Jean Wan was about to agree to leave Cambodia because of Phong Ling's pretense of indifference, suddenly, a cold voice came from not far away. "What's the matter?" The two of them turned around and saw Li Nanheng approaching. Why was he at the Cambodian airport? Shouldn't he be at the camp on the other side of Tunnel Sap Lake? However, just a few days ago, Phong Ling had just been bullied by this man. Her expression froze for a moment, especially when she saw the coldness in his eyes. She thought he was blaming her for her incompetence because Jean Wan appeared here, so she subconsciously explained, "Sorry, I didn't expect Mrs. Mo to get on the plane with us. I'll send her back to High City as soon as possible." Of course, Li Nanheng's coldness was not because of Jean Wan's appearance here. Everyone could see the love between Jean Wan and Mo Jingshun. If she could calmly stay in High City and enjoy the fruits of others fighting to save her husband, she would not be the woman Mo Jingshun would care about. Even if she came, it wouldn't be a problem, so it wasn't a big deal. He hadn't forgotten that Phong Ling had asked Jean Wan to buy contraceptive pills for her. These days, he had to rush to Cambodia. He hadn't had time to settle the score with her, but now she had flown over and bumped into him. Li Nanheng's gaze shifted coldly from Phong Ling's face to Jean Wan. "What are you doing here?" "Mo Jingshan is here." Jean Wan's eyes were calm. He watched her for a while and then glanced at Phong Ling. She didn't know if he was being sarcastic or unintentional. It wasn't easy to get on the plane under your nose. Phong Ling, if it were before, when she was mocked by him like this in the base, she would at most admit that it was her dereliction of duty. But now facing this man, she just put on a cold expression and couldn't even smile. It seems that in terms of bravery, Jean Wan is definitely not as good as you. But in terms of wisdom, I think Jean Wan may be slightly better than you. Jean Wan, Phong Ling, she scolded him for being stupid, the other brothers who followed her. "Boss, what's wrong with you? How can you still be in a mood to mock Phong Ling at this time? Don't you see that Mrs. Mo's face is even more bitter than Huang Lian?" Phong Ling put on a cold face and didn't want to talk to him. "I'll have Kay send Mrs. Mo back. She's already here. How can we send her back? She landed in High City today, and we'll find a way to fly back tomorrow morning. At that time, I'm afraid Mo Jingshun will not be the only one missing," Li Nanheng said coldly. Li Nanheng said coldly, "She is trying to avoid our sight and stay in Cambodia or standing in front of us safely. Which one is more worrisome?" Phong Ling frowned. "But it's too dangerous here. Before she flew here, she knew better than you that she would face many unknown dangers. She's not a child. She can accept and bear the choices she made. What are you worried about?" Li Nanheng said and looked at Jean Wan lightly. "We don't have much time. Go back to High City or stay here. I'll give you one last choice." "I'll stay." Jean Wan didn't hesitate. Phong Ling frowned. "But Mrs. Mo, you are pregnant." Hearing the word pregnant, Li Nanheng suddenly glanced at Jean Wan and then at her belly. After a moment, Li Nanheng asked, "Jean Wan, are you afraid of death?" "No." Seeing the determination in Jean Wan's eyes, Li Nanheng narrowed his eyes and wanted to say, "You are pregnant. How dare you buy contraceptive pills for my wife?" Of course, he just scolded her in his heart. Li Nanheng looked at her coldly, lit a cigarette, put it in the corner, narrowed his eyes, and turned his head. "Follow me." Then Jean Wan was taken to their camp near Tunnel Sap Lake in Cambodia. After arriving at the camp, Li Nanheng asked Phong Ling to send her to a small room in the camp to rest on behalf of Mrs. Mo, and Phong Ling took her in. Jean Wan was in a good mood. Although she didn't know Mo Jingshan's identity, she was very receptive. Now that she was taken in here, she felt closer to Mo Jingshan, so she didn't show any emotion on her face. Seeing that Jin Wan was very rational and had probably thought through a lot of things before coming here, Feng Ling didn't say anything more. After settling her down, she turned and walked out. When they got outside, Kay and the others are discussing the countermeasures to break in, but because the woods were surrounded by dense minefields, it was very difficult to break in, and they were not familiar with the terrain here. They could only be sure that Mr. Mo was trapped in it and was not in danger for the time being, but in order to ensure that Dolly and the others wouldn't hurt him, they had to think of a foolproof way. Chapter 1152. He didn't need to look back to know who was looking at him. After all, Bosley was also outside at this moment. Kay put down his hand with a strong desire to live. In order to cover up his embarrassment, he rubbed his hand on his clothes and made a scratching gesture. Then he smiled and bumped Feng Ling's arm with his bent arm. "How is it? You've been a bodyguard for so long. One moment, you're the mayor's daughter, and the next moment, you're Mrs. Mo's. Do you feel comfortable? Is it more comfortable to come back to be with us brothers?" Feng Ling didn't take this step at all and directly answered, "It's all good. They're all very good to me. It's very comfortable and comfortable." "Kay, no wonder you're so heartless. You've already gotten back the face you lost. It's time for you to come back." Feng Ling glanced at the sniper rifle in Kay's hand. "In fact, I'm also a very troublesome existence for 11 Base. After all, the rules and regulations can't be disrupted because of me. Even if the higher-ups give me a suitable identity, I'm not qualified to be a drill master. I don't want to make the brothers and the other teams secretly unhappy because of my special identity, which will only make the brothers and the base unable to work together. But I will also remember the kindness of the base. If you need me, I will not hesitate to come back. Just like now, as long as you give me a gun, I can risk my life for 11 Base at any time." Kay tooted. Who wants you to risk your life? We just miss you. How good the days were when the 5 of us were together. Don't you miss us? I miss you, but life always goes on. People can't always look back and think about the past. As long as we are still alive, we can see each other whenever we want. We don't have to maintain the relationship of standing in a row every day to train in the base. After going out for a few years, you become much more eloquent. In the past, you didn't even bother to explain anything to us, but now you even know how to say such polite words." Kay snorted. Feng Ling chuckled. "It's not polite words. I mean it. We can see each other whenever we want." After chatting for a while, Feng Ling was about to go to the team to get a gun, but perhaps because she hadn't been too close to these people for a long time, she suddenly appeared in front of them. When she passed by, everyone glanced at her. "What are you looking at? Haven't you seen a woman before?" Li Nanheng went to get a gun suitable for her. When he caught a glimpse of those people's eyes, his face turned cold. "Everyone. I've never seen such a feminine Feng Ling." In fact, Feng Ling's change was not particularly big, but perhaps because she had been outside for a long time and hadn't deliberately disguised as a man for 3 years, the feeling she gave people was very natural. When she was natural, it could be seen that she only had short hair, but she was really a woman from head to toe. In particular, Feng Ling habitually wore a scarf around her neck to cover up the traces that hadn't disappeared in the past 3 or 4 days. Although Cambodia was a very troublesome place, and everyone was wearing short-sleeved shirts, she did not take off her scarf. The rare red color on her body made her particularly attractive to men. Li Nanheng frowned coldly and glanced at Feng Ling indifferently. "Why are you standing there? Did I ask you to come here to be admired?" Feng Ling, did this man eat a bomb? However, Li Nanheng glanced at the scarf around her neck and seemed to guess what she was covering. Although he was still unhappy because of the contraceptive pills, when he thought of the traces he left on her body, he felt a little better, but he just threw the gun into his hand and turned away with a dark face. At night, in the camp, several groups of people were responsible for patrolling at different times to ensure the safety and vigilance around the camp. Feng Ling had just finished patrolling with Kay and the others outside, and it was already past 10 o'clock in the evening when the next group of people came. Cambodia was indeed very hot. She felt uncomfortable wearing the scarf, but she didn't take it off. The others asked her why she kept wearing it, and she casually explained that she accidentally hurt her neck a few days ago. Her cervical vertebra was injured, so she couldn't be exposed to the wind, so she wore it. But when she returned to the small room in the camp, she finally took off the scarf after entering the door and closing the door. It was so hot that she was sweating all over. She quickly scrubbed and felt refreshed and comfortable before picking up a new black short-sleeve t-shirt that Kay had given her. This small room was divided into small rooms, very simple and crude, and there was no mirror. She picked up her cell phone and looked at her neck, only to see that the traces near her collarbone were still there, and there was also a little trace on the front of her neck. Normally, it had been 3 days, and all the traces should have disappeared, but Li Nanheng, that beast, probably wanted to eat her. The traces left on her body had only faded a little, but when she looked carefully, she could still see that they were all kiss marks. But it was not appropriate to keep wearing the scarf like this. Today, because she had just flown from High City, she didn't have time to change her clothes. She had been so stuffy all day, so she definitely wouldn't wear it tomorrow. She might have to find a way to get some plasters or bandages from others to cover her wounds. She hurriedly tidied up her clothes because she felt that these clothes were sweaty, so she took them out to wash. When she was washing clothes, Tam happened to come out to wash his pants. When he saw Feng Ling, he said, "I saw that the cell phone you used in the afternoon is the same model as mine. The charger I brought seems to be broken." "Did you bring your cell phone charger? Lend it to me." "Yes, I'll get it for you later." Feng Ling wrung the clothes dry, hung them on the drying pole outside, and walked quickly inside, ready to help Tam get the charger. However, when she walked to the door of the small room where she lived temporarily, she suddenly saw the opposite door open. She didn't know who lived opposite, so she pushed the door open and turned to enter her room. But when she was about to close the door, she suddenly felt a force coming from the door to stop her from closing it. She turned her eyes, only to see Li Nanheng's face colliding into her sight. The man's eyes were very unkind, as if he wanted to settle accounts with her. He pushed the door open and walked in. The moment Feng Ling saw the man's cold gaze and the way he suddenly barged in, the scene of her being pressed on the bed by him a few days ago was still vivid in her mind. Feng Ling subconsciously took a step back, but the room was too small. After taking a step, she was already at the bedside. Her legs were blocked by the bed, and she asked, "What are you doing?" Chapter 1153. Don't you know what I'm doing? Li Nanheng caught her as she almost fell back on the bed. To prevent himself from doing something to her, after pressing her on the bed, he turned around and pressed her against the door. At the same time, when she was about to struggle, he raised his hand and locked the door from the inside. Surrounded by the man's breath and hearing the sound of the door being locked, Feng Ling's movement stiffened. She looked incredulously at the cold, hard, and handsome face in front of her. The man didn't give her a chance to reprimand him. He raised his hand and pinched her chin, forcing her to look into his eyes, and said in a low voice, "Did you take the medicine?" Feng Ling was puzzled and stared at him. "What medicine?" Li Nanheng pinched her chin, and the words were almost squeezed out from between his teeth. "Contraceptive pills." Feng Ling, how did he know that she bought that kind of thing? Since Jin Wan would buy it for her, she definitely wouldn't tell this kind of thing to Li Nanheng. And at that time, Jin Wan clearly thought that she was raped by Li Nanheng and was very dissatisfied with what he did, so she definitely wouldn't tell him. Then how'd he know? Feng Ling stared at him blankly for a few seconds before her eyes flickered and she responded, "In." Then she lowered her head and was about to slip out of the confinement circle between his body and the door. However, when the man heard her, he seemed to be instantly angered. He pinched her chin, and his grip was much stronger than before. At the same time, his eyes were bursting with anger. "Why did you take the medicine? Even if you're really pregnant, I didn't King say that I won't take responsibility. You're not, child. You're of marriageable age. Are you afraid of pregnancy?" "Feng Ling, speak. Do you want me to be so irritable every time I talk to you? Tell me, why did you take the medicine?" Li Nanheng was so angry that he wanted to break her chin. It was not because of the bet between him and Grandfather Lee about whether he could have a great-grandchild within a year, but because he loved her, he would do it. If she was really pregnant, he would do it. He had never felt that there would be anyone else between him and Feng Ling. Everything could be done naturally because of their relationship. In the future, if she really needed him to take contraceptive measures, he could be careful and avoid it, but if she was really pregnant, he would do it. There was no need to take any medicine at all. That kind of medicine was very harmful to women. How could she take the medicine so easily after he turned to fly back to the United States? How could she be so cold to take it? Feng Ling didn't expect him to be so angry. When she asked Jin Wan to buy medicine for her, she thought that their professional identities were suitable for an accidental pregnancy. Besides, she had known Miss Wan for a long time and often heard Miss Wan's doctor friends talk about the experiences of girls who got pregnant accidentally, so she thought it was not the right time. Besides, she wasn't ready, so she asked Jin Wan to buy medicine for her. Jin Wan nodded, but she didn't expect that a contraceptive pill would make him so angry. Did he mean that he wanted to have a child with her? Feng Ling didn't think about it at all. She just looked at the anger in the man's eyes and found that she was speechless. Facing his eyes, she didn't know what to say. She was silent for a moment before looking into his eyes and saying, "I didn't think that much." She wanted to explain, but when the words came to her mouth, she didn't know how to say it. She was not good at expressing herself, and he seemed to be really angry. In Feng Ling's mind, she was a little confused. Did he really want a child? Seeing that she clearly wanted to say something, but in the end, she just looked at him calmly. Li Nanheng couldn't bear her attitude of being too restrained and too trapped in her own world. He suddenly raised her chin, lowered his head, and kissed her hard on the lips. In the beginning, there seemed to be a bit of anger. Although the kiss did not go deep, there was a bit of nibbling. He was determined to make her react in pain. However, seeing the little woman pressed against the door by him, her calm eyes gradually revealed some helplessness. He then saw that the corners of her eyes were a little red from his kiss. That kind of red was not because she was about to cry, but whenever she seemed to be forced into a corner by his passion, a faint blush would appear on her face out of habit. It could represent the most obvious feeling of a young girl on her body. At least under his kiss, he could directly see the reflection of her eyes with his eyes. It had to be said that Feng Ling, a woman who usually looked stubborn when she was really helpless, her gaze was really more useful than any aphrodisiac. Just this one look was enough to make him, a man who had just had sex, want to throw her on the narrow bed next to him. In this small room that had no soundproofing at all and was so shabby that the wooden wall could collapse at any time, he wanted to strip her clean on the spot. He wanted to tear off her clothes and leave more marks on her body so that she would clearly remember who was her man. He wanted her to be covered with his marks from inside to outside, from top to bottom. No matter what kind of contraceptive pills she took, they would not be able to get rid of it. Feng Ling was forced to lean against the door and was almost suffocated by the man's kiss. She raised her hand and pinched his shoulder hard to make him let go of her, and then silently accused him of his violence with her slightly red eyes. But Li Nanheng was really angry. He saw that she was extremely tired at that time. Although he planned to take her back to the United States to confront Feng Mingzhu, considering that she really wanted to rest at that time, and considering that she didn't want to acknowledge the Feng family, he left her in T-City and flew back to the United States alone to deal with Feng Mingzhu's matter. It was just a flight of more than 10 hours. He originally planned to let her have a good sleep first. She, on the other hand, actually dared to eat the medicine without even saying a word. Thinking back to all these years, when he thought that she was still a man and that he was gay, he was willing to sacrifice his feelings for her. Later on, when he found out that she was a woman, for the sake of her dignity and what she wanted, he helped her keep her secret and slowly approached her step by step, afraid that he would scare her. Chapter 1154. But what had she done all this time? She's been hiding. If she didn't like him, it would be fine. He could just treat it as a one-sided love. It didn't mean that as long as he gave his feelings, the other person had to reciprocate with the same feelings. But she liked him. However, although she looked tough on the surface, she was timid from time to time. She was the kind of person who would be happy like a child if someone gave her a little bit of hope and sunshine. But as long as someone told her that the sunshine didn't belong to her, she would immediately go back into the darkness, curl up, and hide. Li Nanheng didn't intend to give her another chance to escape. After knowing her feelings, he just wanted to drag her out of her snail shell step by step. Behind Feng Ling's stubbornness, there was a timidity that others couldn't see. If she was allowed to be like this, she would only show her back and the back of her head to others. She looked tough, heroic, and fearless, as though everyone in front of her was just a passerby. But Li Nanheng knew that this was just a layer of cold, hard shell on the outside of her fragility. He had seen the warmth and love that Feng Ling had carefully tested. It was so pure and clean. Although her reaction was always slow, it was extremely sincere. He didn't want to hide her back in her hard shell because of the misunderstanding 3 years ago, and he couldn't let her continue to be so timid. Feng Ling could no longer wear such a cold and unapproachable mask. If she was unwilling to take off this mask, he would take it off for her. But step by step until today, she used her hypocritical shell on the surface to hit the heart that he held in front of her with his hands again and again. How could she be so cruel? Feng Ling felt that the man's hand had unexpectedly reached into her clothes and was even ruthlessly trying to carve something on her body. It was very heavy, and wherever his palm passed, it was slightly painful. She bit her lips and turned her face away. Just as she was about to scold him, she suddenly heard footsteps approaching from outside. Her eyes flickered and she was about to speak, but at this moment, the man bent down and harshly pressed his lips against hers. Feng Ling immediately frowned. Under the man's angry kiss, she also stared at his black eyes angrily. She glared at him angrily, but he didn't close his eyes. The two of them looked at each other very closely, and their lips hurt. Their eyes also hurt from staring at each other, but they didn't let go. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Feng Ling's heart suddenly trembled with fright. She leaned against the door plank, which was just a very thin plank made of local trees in Cambodia. It was just a temporary war camp of 11 base, so it was very simple. When the door plank was knocked gently, she seemed to feel the vibration and force between the fingers of the person knocking on the door. Feng Ling, have you found a charger? My cell phone is running out of power. Lend it to me. Tam's voice rang outside the door, and then he knocked twice. Where are you? Didn't you say you would come in to get the charger? Are you too tired? Why don't you go to sleep? Feeling there was no response from the door, Tam knocked gently outside and muttered, Gee, women are really inconvenient. When we were brothers, we could just push the door open to get the charger. Now you are a girl. If you really fall asleep, it's not convenient for me to go in. Then he continued to knock. Don't blame me for being annoyed. My cell phone is really running out of power. Hurry up, Feng Ling. Feeling that Tam's voice was in her ear, Feng Ling instinctively held her breath. However, when a man who was pressing her against the door heard the words outside, he didn't let go of her at all. Instead, when he saw her nervousness, he suddenly sneered, lowered his head, and continued to kiss her lips. When she was not paying attention, his tongue swept up and the kiss was so deep that she almost sobbed. She tried hard to hold back her tears and glared at the man who was acting recklessly, warning him that there was someone outside, but Li Nanheng still didn't close his eyes. He kissed her deeply, entangled the stiff tip of her tongue in her mouth, and watched her expression full of worry, embarrassment, and panic as if he could only find some comfort in her anxious expression. Seeing that she was more nervous, he kissed her deeper. Even his hands kept moving behind her, and his hands had already moved past the secret button of her underwear. Because of the movement of his hands behind her, Feng Ling only felt a layer of goosebumps on her back. She glared at him and was so angry that she was about to bite him. However, when she opened her mouth to bite him, the man suddenly let go of her lips, pressed his forehead against hers, and whispered while panting against her lips, "Tell him, there is someone in your room, and are you crazy?" Feng Ling was so angry that she whispered, "Where are you now? Mr. Mo's life is still in danger. How dare you flirt here?" Before she finished speaking, she was kissed hard by the man again. Tam, who was standing outside the door, seemed to hear something, but he couldn't hear it clearly. He thought it was Feng Ling playing with her mobile phone inside, so he knocked on the door a few times and asked, "Feng Ling, are you asleep or awake? Don't mess with me. I'm really waiting for the charger to be used urgently." Hearing that Tam was really anxious, Feng Ling raised her hand and pushed hard on Li Nanheng's shoulder, but the man held her tightly, sucked her lips, and continued to press his hand against the door. If she moved a little more, his hand would definitely make a clear sound on the door. Feng Ling felt as if she was threatened now. She glared at him and raised her leg to attack his lower body, but the man pressed her leg down the moment she moved, looked down at her, and said lightly, "Mo Jingshan won't die. You're not Jin Wan. Why are you so anxious? I'm about to die of anger because of you. Are you really stupid, or just pretending to be stupid? Can't you tell I'm angry? What the hell are you angry with?" Feng Ling said angrily. "Feng Ling." Tam's voice came again from outside the door. "Who the hell are you talking to? What are you doing inside? Was there someone else in your room?" Speaking of this, Tam suddenly paused and turned to look at another room opposite this one. The door was closed, and he remembered that it seemed to be the place where Bosley lived recently. Chapter 1155. Looking at the door of the room for a while, Tam hesitated and walked over. He knocked on the door, but no one was there. He raised his hand and tried to push the door again, only to find that the door opened and was not locked. But there was no one in the room. But he remembered that Bosley was not outside at this time, and it was not the time for Bosley to take the lead in patrolling. So where was Bosley at this time? A few seconds later, Tam seemed to think of something. He suddenly turned to look at the tightly closed door of Feng Ling's room, and suddenly took a step back, as if there was a thorn in his back. He immediately cleared his throat and suddenly said, "Cough. Well, I'll go borrow a charger from someone else. Feng Ling, you go ahead. Don't worry about me. I remember that Lin Cheng's cell phone model seems to be this one. I'll go borrow it from him." With that, Tam ran away as if running for his life. Hearing Tam's tone, Feng Ling knew that he must have guessed something. Feng Ling leaned against the door and rolled her eyes at the man's shoulder. When she raised her eyes again, the man took advantage of the fact that the people outside had left and was about to pick her up and throw her onto the bed. The moment her feet left the ground, she coldly said, "I didn't take birth control pills." The man's originally angry and somewhat violent mood stagnated in an instant. His movements paused, lowering his eyes to look at the little woman in his arms who had a cold expression on her face. "What?" I said, "I didn't take contraceptive pills." Feng Ling turned her eyes to him. Because of his posture, when she turned around, her face was very close to his. She didn't avoid him, but looked at him calmly. "I didn't take them." Feng Ling's eyes were frank and clean, without any trace of guilt. When a man raised his eyebrows, she said, "I did ask Mrs. Mo to buy contraceptive pills for me that day, but after buying them, she told me that this kind of pills would be harmful to my body and asked me to think carefully before taking them. I was very confused at that time and didn't think clearly, so I put the pills in the drawer." In the evening, she paused and then said, "I wanted to take a bath, but I found that I was on my period." Hearing the word period, Li Nanheng frowned. Her period came at the right time. "I remember hearing from Miss Wen's doctor friend that if you forget to take your medicine after sex and your period comes a few days later, then you don't have to worry about anything, because you definitely won't get pregnant at that stage. I just had sex with you, and my period came at night, which means that I definitely didn't win the lottery, so I simply didn't take the medicine. The medicine has been in the drawer in the bedroom," she said as she looked at him. "Today is the 3rd day of my period. If you don't believe me, you can try it yourself." Since she said so, then it must be true. There was no need to believe or not. However, Li Nanheng still instinctively carried her to sit on the bed and reach his hand down. Sure enough, he felt a soft thing under her lower body. No wonder she looked normal today, but she didn't look very well. It turned out that she was on her period. It was inevitable that she would feel a little uncomfortable after coming here from High City, but she was used to holding back her discomfort. Of course, she wouldn't easily say this kind of thing. Although it wasn't the first time that they had done it, Guning couldn't remember how many times they had done it during the night and the morning in Tea City a few days ago. Gu Ning had touched Gu Ning's body from head to toe. However, during her menstrual period, allowing a man to touch her lower body to see if she was really wearing a sanitary pad was really too intimate. Although it was nothing, it was really too intimate. Feng Ling didn't speak anymore, but the accusation and displeasure in her eyes were obvious. At this moment, the anger on Li Nanheng's body had also subsided, and it had completely subsided. So his anger just now was actually just a misunderstanding. At that time, he almost did something to her. He glanced at the marks left on her neck that had yet to fade, and then at her slightly pale face. He stared blankly at the way she was forcefully held in his arms. Li Nanheng coughed, slowly withdrew his hand from under her knees, and tentatively pressed it against her stomach. Then do you feel uncomfortable now? Does your stomach hurt, or... My stomach hurts. Feng Ling didn't want to hide anything now, looked at him coldly, and answered directly. Li Nanheng, facing Feng Ling who cried in pain, he felt even more guilty in an instant. He hurriedly rubbed her stomach with his hand. Does it hurt? How long has it hurt? It has been hurting since you came in. I wanted to come back to lie down and rest after taking the charger for Tam, but the dog pressed me against the door and bit me for a long time. Feng Ling continued to look at him coldly. Li Nanheng, after a long while, he said helplessly, sorry. His hand was still slowly rubbing her stomach. Feng Ling didn't want to talk to him and was about to get up from his arms. Although Li Nanheng was reluctant to let her go, seeing that she was really angry, he knew he had wronged her, so he quickly let her go. Feng Ling was finally free. After getting down from his legs, she reached out and pulled his shoulder, trying to make him stand up. Li Nanheng stood up. He thought she had something to say, but Feng Ling pointed to the door with a dark face. Get out. Li Nanheng, I apologize. I don't need your apology. Get out. I want to rest. Li Nanheng, I was impulsive just now. If you are really angry, you can punch me. I don't want to do anything now. Get out. Feng Ling lost her patience. She reached out and pushed him out. She pulled open the door and pushed the man out without a care. Then she closed the door. Knowing that she was angry, Li Nanheng didn't force her. After being pushed out of the door, he wanted to stand outside the door and repent. At this time, he had to admit his mistake quickly. Otherwise, this little wife would really give him the cold shoulder for several days. However, just when he was pushed out of the door, Tam, who had finally borrowed a charger from someone else's room, was happily walking here with a charger and a data cable in his hand, whistling. He was just passing by, but suddenly ran into Li Nanheng, who was pushed out of the door by Feng Ling. The two men looked at each other, and Li Nanheng glanced at him expressionlessly. With just a glance, the smile in Tam's eyes and the whistling sound in his mouth all stopped abruptly. Oh my God! The mighty and cold boss Li was driven out of the room by Feng Ling. What should he do now? Was it too late to pretend to be blind? Kiss me for monthly votes. Chapter 1156. Tam secretly asked in his heart how to save his life now. Turn around and walk away, pretending not to see it? But his eyes had met Boss Li's eyes. Otherwise, he could just pretend not to know what had happened and continue to pass by. But just now he knocked on the door for a long time. Obviously, it seemed that he had ruined Boss Li's plan. Now Boss Li's expression seemed to be about to eat him. If he really couldn't do it, he could only poke his eyes. Cough. Tam coughed lightly, and then suddenly turned around. While touching the wall on the side, he narrowed his eyes and said, Oh, when I went to dismantle the mines nearby yesterday, my eyes may have been injured by the gunpowder in the small mine that was accidentally detonated. Why are my eyes blurred? Who is standing there, Kay? Is it you? Li Nanheng. Tam walked out with his back to him, touched the wall, and then reached out to touch his back, and then said, Oh, look at my eyes. I really can't see clearly. There's no one around me. My name is Kay. I don't know how many days it will take for my eyes to recover. Alas, I'm finished. I'm going to spend the rest of my life with these eyes. I can't see anything. With that, after walking a little further, he sped up the speed of touching the wall, and finally sped up his pace. When he reached the corner near the door, he slipped away. The next day, when everyone woke up, they found that Mrs. M.O. had helped them clean up the camp and even helped them wash the socks of the base members. The fragrance of laundry detergent wafted in the bulletproof shed of the entire camp. Mrs. M.O., you ate jerky and dried fruits all day yesterday. Today, our people brought back some fish and shrimps from outside. We plan to grill some seafood near the river. You should go eat some fish, too. You need nutrition every day. Feng Ling smelled the laundry detergent and walked into Jin Wan's room, only to see that Jin Wan's room was also unbelievably clean. Jin Wan insisted on doing something. She didn't want to be taken care of here, doing nothing. She could understand her feelings, so Feng Ling didn't stop her, but she didn't expect Jin Wan to clean up so thoroughly. Although the men of 11 Base were not dirty, they smelled of blood and sweat. Besides, there were not many men who were obsessed with cleanliness like Li Nanheng. Most of them were careless men who were sloppy and casual. Even if the smell was not bad, the place where they were stationed didn't smell particularly good. It smelled really good now. Why did you even wash the socks? Feng Ling looked at the pairs of socks hanging outside, and then at Jin Wan's hands. Did you wash them by hand? Otherwise, you all came in such a hurry and didn't bring any daily necessities. Do you think there's a washing machine here? Jin Wan said as she swept the floor. The ground was covered with various tropical insects that had been killed by pesticides. Fortunately, the people of the base knew that this was a tropical area and brought a lot of insecticides. Otherwise, these insects crawling out of the jungle were likely to climb onto their beds. Mrs. M.O., in fact, you don't have to do anything. Mr. M.O. is a very respected and important person in our eyes. You should enjoy preferential treatment here. You don't need to do these things. Feng Ling wanted to go up and help. If I don't do these things to keep myself busy, my heart will only be more chaotic. Are you worried about Mr. M.O.? Jin Wan lowered her hand and held the broom. After a moment of silence, she said softly, "Although I'm worried, I believe in you and believe that he will be fine." Feng Ling said, "Those people won't easily kill Mr. M.O. If Mr. M.O. doesn't hand over the confidential information of the underground arms trade, they won't dare to touch him for the time being. At present, the people of 11 Base have determined the position of the enemy in the jungle, but because there are dangerous minefields around here, we need to wait for the helicopter rescue team of the U.S. police to come and wait for the best time to ensure everyone's safety." Jin Wan nodded. "I know. If you have something to do, go ahead. You don't have to accompany me. I'll find something to do. Let's go eat fish. They're already grilling it." Jin Wan nodded. Although she had been thinking about Mo Jingshen, she knew that Feng Ling really cared about her, so she didn't continue to dawdle and followed Feng Ling out. Feng Ling didn't expect that Jin Wan, who was often protected by her, not only didn't drag them down in such a place, but even made everyone feel that Mrs. Mo's existence had become indispensable. She could wash clothes and cook. For these rough men, she was simply a goddess. Although Feng Ling was a woman, because of the environment she grew up in and living with this group of men, in some aspects, she really didn't know as much as Jin Wan did. For example, Jin Wan could make the fish they caught into fish soup and take Feng Ling to the nearby village to exchange for some food seasonings, oil, salt, and other things to make the fish soup more delicious. Even Li Nanheng, who had always been indifferent to Jin Wan, made a rare comment after tasting the fish soup Jin Wan made. It seems that Qin's sighting was telling the truth when he said that Jin Wan had become a good wife and mother. This Miss G really knows how to cook. I just didn't expect that the first time I tasted Miss G's cooking would be in such an environment. Jin Wan said, "I think you usually eat well in the base in the United States. The food here these 2 days is really too perfunctory. So you stay in Cambodia, and now you plan to stay and cook for everyone?" Li Nanheng looked at her with a faint smile. "Why can't I? Are you sure you can bear this kind of grievance?" In Li Nanheng's eyes, most women were delicate and troublesome. Even if not all of them were so delicate, they were not very useful. Except for Feng Ling, who was the only special one in his eyes, he really didn't care much about other women. As for Jin Wan, she was the woman in Mo Jingshen's heart. He couldn't treat his brother's woman too coldly. When it was time to take care of her, he would do her a favor. At this time, a little brother in the base sipped the fish soup and said, Mrs. Mo washed all our socks this morning. There should be nothing more grievance than washing dozens of pairs of socks at once, right? Li Nanheng immediately turned his eyes to Jin Wan. 2 seconds later, he said lightly, I think we'd better let Mo Jingshan run his own course. Don't save him. Jin Wan, what do you mean? Save him and let him know that his wife is cooking for us and washing her socks here. I'm afraid the consequences won't be good. Jin Wan, everyone. Chapter 1157. When Jin Wan went in with the fish soup, Li Nanheng stood still and casually glanced at Feng Ling, who was helping Jin Wan distribute the fish soup to the others. Looking at her figure, who kept a distance from him, he said, Sure enough, there has never been a woman in the base. It's rare to have a woman here. It feels different. Everyone could tell that Boss Li was deliberately trying to find something to talk to Feng Ling. However, Feng Ling ignored him ungratefully. When she received the looks of the other brothers, which meant that Boss was looking at her, she handed the bowl of fish soup in her hand out again and replied expressionlessly, If you're not afraid of being poisoned to death, I don't mind cooking for you when we return to the base. The two of them were really sneak attacks against sneak attacks. Both of them were stubborn. Tam and Kay looked at each other with a smile while drinking the fish soup. They didn't know how to deal with Boss, and Feng Ling Li Nanheng looked at her back and said, There are chefs from all over the world in the base. You don't need to show your skills, but we do need a woman for this field operation. In fact, he just wanted Feng Ling to know that even if she returned to the base, she didn't need to cook and just needed to stay by his side. But obviously, she still didn't want to accept his invitation. She ignored him and continued to do her own things. After the fish soup was distributed, Feng Ling turned to go to the other side, but when she walked over, her wrist was suddenly held. She turned her eyes and looked at the hand on her wrist coldly. Let go. Does it still hurt? Li Nanheng glanced at her belly. He really wanted to find something to talk about, but he couldn't find a perfect way to break the ice with her attitude. Did he ask her if it hurt? Why didn't he ask her if it hurt when he pressed her down on the bed in the hotel and in Wen Liqing's bedroom a few days ago? Why didn't he ask her if it hurt when he pressed her down and bit her for a long time yesterday? Now he knew how to care about her. Feng Ling was about to hit him away, but the brother who was still drinking the soup next to him accidentally heard Li Nanheng's words and deliberately coughed to ask, What do you mean? Does it still hurt? Feng Ling is injured. Since our boss Li asked about it in person, it must be a serious injury, right? Oh, Feng Ling, where are you hurt? Li Nanheng raised his leg and kicked him in the shoulder. Get lost. You're everywhere. The little brother chuckled and hid in the bulletproof shed with the bowl in his hands. At the same time, he tooted and glanced back, thinking Boss Li cares about Feng Ling, but they are not allowed to care about her. I told you to let go. Feng Ling saw that many of the brothers around were looking at her curiously and gossipy. She tried her best to break free from his hand. Li Nanheng never felt the need to hide anything from these people. Most of the brothers in the base could see the relationship between him and Feng Ling, so there was nothing to hide. He didn't let go of her wrist and looked sideways at her. Obviously, she was really angry with him yesterday. Behave, okay? Get lost. Feng Ling impatiently raised her leg and kicked him. At this time, Jin Wan scooped another pot of fish soup and heard a strange sound in the dense forest. The brothers who came to help her carry the bowl lowered their voices and said, Mrs. Mo, don't go there. Boss and Feng Ling are fighting. Don't hurt you. Jin Wan, in the past few days, although the brothers have been stationed in this place hard, waiting for the opportunity to enter and rescue, because Mrs. Mo always tried to cook delicious food, everyone's living standard had soared, and they all felt happy living in this place. In the evening, Feng Ling accompanied Jin Wan for a walk by the river, talking along the way. Jin Wan was not a particularly gossipy person, but she was very concerned about Feng Ling's affairs. She occasionally asked her about Li Nanheng, but Feng Ling mostly didn't answer. And these days, she had been avoiding too much contact with Li Nanheng. Even if everyone knew that there was a relationship between her and Li Nanheng, she didn't want to be so obvious and direct. After all, they used to be brothers, and she always felt particularly uncomfortable under everyone's eyes. The two of them took a walk for a while and were about to go back, when suddenly she noticed that there seemed to be something on the other side of the river. To ensure Jin Wan's safety, Feng Ling left Jin Wan on this side of the river where the brothers of the base were stationed and went to the other side to check the situation. Because just now, someone in the grass on the other side shone a flashlight on Feng Ling. Obviously, they only saw Feng Ling from this angle and shouldn't see Jin Wan. She asked Jin Wan to stay here so that she could hide temporarily to avoid being hurt. However, there seemed to be a lot of people on the other side. After making sure that Jin Wan was hiding in the grass here, Feng Ling went straight to the other side. Sure enough, there were people on the other side. As soon as she went over, Feng Ling's ears twitched, and she turned sharply to avoid the knife that was chopped at her in the dark. In the moonlight, she looked back and saw the cold light on the knife in the man's hand. She narrowed her eyes and dodged again, jumped up, and kicked the man's foot hard. There were not many people hiding in the grass on the other side of the river, and Feng Ling killed them in a few minutes. She didn't hear any sound from the other side and thought that Jin Wan was still hiding there quietly. After checking for a minute, she turned back. But when she returned to the grass where Jin Wan had been hiding, she found that Jin Wan had disappeared. Mrs. Mo, Feng Ling looked around and frowned. Jin Wan. Her low voice was scattered in the wind, and the river of tunnel sap lake in the distance was calm and dark. No one responded. There was only a cell phone left in the grass, lying there quietly. Feng Ling searched all the way back to the camp. After asking, she confirmed that Jin Wan had not come back, so she said in a low voice, "Jin Wan has been caught." As soon as she finished speaking, the brothers who had just eaten stood up in an instant, and their faces turned cold like Feng Ling's. The camp was surrounded by more serious guards, and someone quickly informed Li Nanheng to prepare a rescue plan. If Mr. Mo was trapped inside, they didn't need to worry for the time being. After all, Mr. Mo had a bargaining chip in his hand, and those people didn't dare to do anything to him. With Mr. Mo's means, he would definitely be able to safely delay enough time to rescue them. But Jin Wan was different. More importantly, Jin Wan was pregnant. If anything happened to her, everyone here would feel ashamed to face Mr. Mo. Hearing the news, Li Nanheng came out and asked, "What happened?" Chapter 1158. Feng Ling stood still and frowned. There were people on the other side of the river just now. I went over to check. Jin Wan shouldn't have made any noise to attract the enemy's attention. There seems to be only one possibility. That is, those people had already arranged people around and were ready to attack at any time, but they accidentally took Jin Wan away. "Boss, what should we do now?" Kay was also very clear about Mrs. Mo's situation. Fearing that something bad would happen, he stood up with a gun in his arms. "We have to rescue her as soon as possible." After a moment of silence, Li Nanheng said lightly, "Arrange some men to guard all the exits of the jungle. Their people only dare to lurk in the dark and dare not make any sound to attract our attention. Although Jin Wan is useless in terms of force, she is different from us. She is not from 11 Base. If she is smart enough, she will know how to stall for time to protect herself. There won't be any problem for the time being. Kay, come in with me." After giving instructions, Li Nanheng took a look at Feng Ling. "Wait here. Don't be impulsive. Don't rush in to rescue her alone." As if being seen through, Feng Ling looked at him. Li Nanheng gave her a warning look again, and then turned and walked in with a serious look. The next day, Feng Ling had changed into a tight-fitting black outfit and hung 2 silencer guns on her waist. She was squatting down to tie her shoelaces, and at the same time, she placed the dagger that flashed with a cold light into the scabbard beside her boots. "What are you doing?" Just as she was about to tie her shoelaces and get up, suddenly, a black shadow appeared in front of her, and a pair of black leather boots stopped in front of her. She could tell it was Li Nanheng's voice without looking. Feng Ling didn't look up, fixed the dagger next to her boots, touched the gun at her waist, stood up, and looked blankly at the man in front of her. "Jin Wan has been taken away for a day and a night. I have to go in to find her. If Li Nanheng hadn't warned her last night, she would have gone in last night. Don't you know the situation around this jungle? If the mines here are as easy to clear as the mines in the Snake Valley, we don't have to stay here for so many days. This place is full of minefields left by the war decades ago, including the new minefields inside. Before you find her, you'll be blown to pieces and wait for us to go in and collect your corpse. Feng Ling frowned. She was caught when she was with me. Whether it's from Mr. Mo's point of view or from my point of view as her bodyguard, the responsibility is on me. Even if my body is smashed into pieces, I must bring her back safely. What I'm afraid of is that you won't be able to find her even if you die, Lin Nanheng scolded. Mr. Mo has the secrets of the arms dealers in his hands. Those people have been afraid of the pressure Mr. Mo exerted on them and don't dare to do anything to him. But Jin Wan is different. She doesn't know those people and doesn't know how bloody and violent they are. It's normal for them to kill without batting an eye. She has a child in her belly and knows how to protect herself. If you rush in now, it's like throwing an egg against a stone, Lin Nanheng said. I know you are more anxious than anyone else because of Jin Wan's accident. The two of you have been together for so long and have developed a very good relationship. But Feng Ling, remember, you are a member of 11 Base. Have you forgotten the rules of the base? He didn't talk about the relationship between him and her, but only the rules of the base. Feng Ling looked at him coldly and didn't speak. Don't be impulsive. That's the first rule. As soon as Lin Nanheng said this, he suddenly kicked her calf unexpectedly. When Feng Ling was about to dodge, he reached out to grab the two guns from her waist, turned them around in his hand, and then put the guns into his own waist. You! Feng Ling glared at him. Stay here and wait. If it weren't for the minefields in this jungle, I would have gone in long ago. You don't need to be so anxious here, Lin Nanheng said expressionlessly. The domestic border rescue team and the SWAT team in the United States will soon send a large number of helicopters over. Wait patiently, okay? We also have a helicopter. I can drive it myself. Feng Ling frowned. Although she didn't specially learn to fly a helicopter in the base, every member would have basic training, so basically everyone knew how to fly a helicopter. It just depended on which team was more skilled. Bullshit. Seeing her fearless look, Lin Nanheng scolded. These people have been fighting against our base for so many years and haven't been wiped out. Now they have the ability to ambush Mo Jingshan, which is enough to show that they have set up layers of ambushes here, just waiting for our base to come in. If you fly in now, before you can parachute in to save him, you'll be shot down by the people below. You have been on so many missions. You've always been calm and cautious, but this time you can't calm down. Feng Ling clenched her fists, thinking of the way Jin Wan usually got along with her like a sister, and then of the scene when Jin Wan obediently squatted in the grass yesterday. She couldn't imagine what Jin Wan was going through now, but she was really uneasy and worried. If you can't calm down, go back to High City and wait for the news. We don't need you here. Seeing her expression, Lin Nanheng scolded her again and confiscated her guns. Obviously, if she still wanted to continue to be impulsive, he would ignore her and turn to leave. Feng Ling looked at his back and then at the two guns on his waist. She secretly clenched her fists and abruptly took a step forward, reaching out to snatch the guns back. However, at the moment when she rushed over, Lin Nanheng pressed her hand on his shoulder and threw her over his shoulder. When she needed to vent her emotions, he couldn't be too lenient with her. Otherwise, she would have nowhere to vent her uneasiness and irritation. Seeing that she kept attacking with a cold face to take back the guns, Lin Nanheng raised his hand to block and only defended. In the end, he clasped her wrist and suddenly pulled the woman who was full of worry into his arms, buckling her in his arms. Seeing this, Feng Ling began to struggle in his arms, but he looked down at her white neck. All the marks on it had now disappeared, and it was as clean as white jade, covered with a thin layer of sweat because of the struggle. Seeing that she was still struggling, Lin Nanheng lowered his head and bit her hard on the neck. Let me go. Feng Ling trembled in pain, and because of this pain, she managed to calm down a little and cried hoarsely. Chapter 11:59. However, her slightly hoarse voice was hoarse to the man's bones. He tightened his grip and bit her neck even more fiercely. It was as if the marks from before had disappeared just like that. He was more or less indignant and wanted to leave something on her body. After not touching her for a few days, he seemed to be addicted to it. He couldn't wait for her menstrual period to end so that he could carry her into the grass and have sex with her on the spot. Hearing the sound here, Kay and Lin Chung thought something was wrong, so they walked over to take a look, only to see this scene in an instant. Shit! The two of them decisively covered their eyes with their hands and then peeked out a little to look over there. The corner of Kay's mouth twitched. What was going on? What was going on between Boss and Phoneling? In the past, they had been hiding it in the base. Even if they really wanted to fall in love, they wouldn't be so blatant. Was Boss going to directly announce to the world that Phoneling was his woman? Seeing someone coming over, Phoneling suddenly stepped on Li Nanhing's leg, bent her leg back, and kicked at his leg bone. Li Nanhing released her in time and dodged to the side to avoid her attack. Phoneling raised her hand and rubbed it hard on her neck, glared at him, and then turned to look at Kay and Lin Chung. What are you standing there for? Kay coughed, saw the bite mark on Phoneling's neck, and bitterly pulled the man next to him to leave, but Phoneling subconsciously said, "A snake came over just now, and I was bitten. Boss just came to help me take the drug, so it's not what you saw." As soon as she finished her explanation, Phoneling almost bit her own tongue. Even she couldn't believe her own explanation. As soon as she explained, Kay and Lin Chung ran away even faster. Seeing them running fast, Phoneling turned to look at Li Nanheng with a cold face, but the man was standing not far from her, with one hand in his trouser pocket and the other playing with the gun he had taken from her. He raised his eyebrows at her. Phoneling closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and abruptly reached out her hand. "Give the gun back to me." Li Nanheng snorted and did not answer. Instead, he said, "Speaking of being bitten by a snake, you were indeed bitten by a poisonous snake when you were on a mission. Do you still remember how I sucked the poison out of you?" Phoneling kept a straight face and did not speak. If it weren't for that incident, he wouldn't have found out that she was a woman disguised as a man. Or perhaps, even if he had discovered it long ago, he wouldn't have been exposed so quickly. At the very least, she could stay in the base for a few more years and live in peace. She gave up on the gun in his hand, turned around, and walked away. She then pulled out the dagger by her feet and threw it behind her. The dagger stabbed deep into the ground, and she left quickly with no expression on her face. Nanheng glanced at the dagger that had been accurately inserted into the ground by his feet and chuckled. He bent down to pick up the dagger and walked over. Because no one knew what had happened to Jean Wan, Phoneling was in a particularly bad mood these 2 days. She was so angry that no one dared to provoke her. After all, Mr. M.O. was missing, and they could calmly consider a careful rescue plan. They believed that with Mr. Mo's wisdom and ability, he would be fine, but they really couldn't guarantee Jean Wan's safety. Even if she could save her life, she was carrying a child in her belly. Even if both of them were rescued in the end, if Jean Wan's child couldn't be saved in this turbulence, everyone would definitely feel guilty. Especially Phoneling. After all, she was responsible for protecting Jean Wan, but this time, not only did she not stay in High City to protect Jean Wan, but she also took Jean Wan to Cambodia. Now Jean Wan's life was hanging in the balance. Now anyone who mentioned Jean Wan's name in front of Phoneling could see the obvious worry on her face. Even if she didn't mention Jean Wan's name, she was even less talkative now. She often didn't even eat, but just sat in front of the temporary public computer in the camp and kept checking the new minefield map around. It was not difficult to see that she was seizing every opportunity to go in to find Jean Wan. She was so anxious that she couldn't stay calm. Besides, Li Nanheng had just offended her, so it was impossible for her to listen to him. Seeing Phoneling sitting in front of the computer again, Li Nanheng glanced at the twinkling stars in the sky, and then glanced at Kay, who had just returned from the patrol area with a sniper rifle in his arms and was about to have dinner. When Kay passed by him, he said, "Kay, I have a task for you." Suddenly hearing Boss Lee's cold voice, Kay suddenly stopped and turned to look at Li Nanheng. Find a way to get Phoneling drunk. Another word full of doubt, but this time he was obviously more confused than when Boss Lee suddenly spoke to him. Don't get too drunk. Let her forget about Jean Wan for a while. Don't be so nervous. The rescue team will arrive before noon tomorrow. Before that, no one is allowed to act rashly. Obviously, she won't listen to orders rationally, and she hasn't slept for 2 days. In her current condition, she won't be able to concentrate on the battle tomorrow and will make mistakes. Li Nanheng said lightly, glancing over Kay's shoulder as if inadvertently glancing at Feng Ling, who was concentrating on checking the map of the minefield. The rescue team will arrive before noon tomorrow. Before that, no one is allowed to act rashly. Kay, boss, your words are too dignified. You want Feng Ling to go to sleep now, but you don't dare to coax her, so just say it. You want to get her drunk? But then again, Feng Ling had been very nervous since Jean Wan was taken away. It could be seen that she was really worried about Jean Wan and really blamed herself. When she was in the base, no matter how dangerous the mission was, no matter how desperate the situation was, she had never been so nervous. It had been 2 days. He really should find a way to calm her down, and the best way was to let her drink some wine. But now, is there a suitable reason to let her drink wine? Boss Lee threw a difficult problem to him. TSK, how despicable. I can find a way to get her drunk, but boss, where is the wine? Kay said, we came to Cambodia for a mission. At such a serious time, who dares to take the wine out of the base? Isn't he tired of living? Where can I get the wine? 4M. Chapter 1160. Li Nanheng glanced at the smallest bulletproof shed next to the camp and said in a voice that only Kay could hear, when Tam went to the nearby village to exchange for ingredients at night, he bought 2 jars of wine brewed by a local farmer. Kay looked at the things that looked like wine jars. No wonder he suddenly asked him to get Feng Ling drunk. It seemed that Boss already had this plan. He actually allowed Tam to exchange for wine. That was to say, now they only needed one person who could compete with Feng Ling in the drinking competition. This person seemed to be him. But Kate clearly remembered that Boss and Feng Ling were still kissing in the jungle. Why don't you go drink with her yourself? Li Nanheng glanced at him coldly. Did she look at me directly today? Of course not. But everyone was busy and didn't want to eat Boss and Feng Ling's dog food, so they didn't deliberately observe the situation between the two of them. But thinking about it carefully, it seemed that except for the ambiguous scene in the jungle, Feng Ling and Boss were with other brothers and didn't have any contact with each other. Kay wanted to ask more, but Li Nanheng had already given him a warning look. Go! Feng Ling read all the information about the distribution of the minefield and all the other rescue preparations on the computer and had a general idea of everything around the jungle in her heart. Although she wouldn't act impulsively, she really couldn't sit still, and the police reinforcement from the United States didn't come, which made her angry. But no matter what, even if she had accumulated a lot of dissatisfaction, she couldn't vent it. She didn't want to go out to explore the way at night when no one was paying attention, but she knew that if she acted rashly, she might only cause trouble for everyone. So she had been sitting here, thinking about how to save Jean Wan and killing time in this way. Otherwise, she always felt that Jean Wan was being tortured now, and her heart was being roasted on a fire. All right, don't stay here alone. Suddenly, Kay came over with 2 bowls and put them in front of her. Feng Ling looked away from the computer screen and at the bowls that Kay put there. These bowls were borrowed from a nearby farm a few days ago. Although they looked very simple, they were very clean. These bowls have been used for meals these days. Kate poured wine into the 2 bowls. I heard Boss say that no matter how much the American police delay, they will arrive at noon tomorrow at the latest. If they still don't arrive, we will go in and save them. Don't worry, there is still more than 10 hours before noon tomorrow. If they still don't arrive, we will go in and save them ourselves. Don't worry, there is still more than 10 hours before noon tomorrow. If something really happens to Mrs. Mo, it should have happened yesterday. If she can survive until now without any danger, I believe that she, like Mr. Mo, has the wisdom of survival of the fittest. She will find a way to protect herself. Don't be so restless. Feng Ling didn't speak for a while and just looked at the wine in the bowl. After a moment of silence, she asked, "Where did you get the wine?" In the afternoon, Tam and the others got drunk. When they went to the nearby farm to exchange things, they got 2 jars of wine, but Tam and Lei Peng were unlucky. They planned to secretly drink some at night, but they had to take the temporary patrol shift tonight. Since they had something to do, they couldn't drink a drop of wine. "I have nothing to do tonight, so I got the wine," Kay said as he picked up a bowl and took a sip, and then sighed with satisfaction. "Yes, this is the wine brewed by the local farmers. It's much better than those bought outside, and I heard that this kind of wine is not easy to get drunk. It's just to satisfy your craving. Do you want to try it? I don't have a preference for wine, and I can't hold my liquor well. I don't need it to satisfy my craving. If you want to drink it yourself." Feng Ling didn't touch the wine. Gee, this wouldn't do. The task that Boss temporarily arranged for him at night was still on his shoulders. "Try it first. It's really delicious," Kay said as he picked up the bowl and put it to her mouth. "If you can't drink it, drink a little. Even if you don't get drunk, you can at least have a good sleep." Feng Ling didn't take it, but said, "I'm fine. I can't sleep even if I don't drink it." "You can't be so tense all the time. You have to lie down and rest." "I'm fine." Seeing this method didn't work, Kay thought for a while and suddenly lowered his head to whisper at her ear, "What on earth happened between you and Boss Lee?" Feng Ling. As he spoke, Kay looked down at Feng Ling's neck, where there was a faint bite mark. "Today, Lin Chung and I saw you and Boss." Before he finished speaking, Feng Ling suddenly took the bowl in his hand and lowered her head to take a sip. She just didn't know how to answer, and she didn't want to talk about Li Nanheng. However, she didn't know how to say too much, and deliberately changing the topic was too stiff. So, she might as well drink to shut her mouth. As soon as she mentioned Li Nanheng, she suddenly drank it. Originally, Kay wanted to talk about love with her in depth and see if he could move her to drink a few mouthfuls of wine, but he never expected that as soon as he mentioned Boss Lee, she would drink it directly. His heart was also itching. Originally, his purpose was to get her drunk, but now he was really curious about what was going on between her and Boss, and more importantly, to what stage it had developed. However, Feng Ling was probably affected by the spiciness of the wine. After taking 2 sips, she endured the burning sensation in her throat and did not want to speak. She lowered her head and frowned as though she was drinking some medicine. She took a few more sips. Seeing that she just drank and didn't speak, Kay leaned close to her and asked, "Hey, don't think this can end the topic. Feng Ling, we've known each other for so many years. It was a coincidence that I brought you into the base. If there really is something between you and Boss, I can be regarded as half a matchmaker, right? You can't hide it from me." Feng Ling. She moved the bowl away from her mouth a little, still looking at the remaining wine in the bowl, endured the burning sensation in her throat, and asked in a low voice, "There's nothing to hide. What do you want to ask?" 4M. Chapter 1161. Kate immediately beamed with joy. "Nothing. I just want to ask you, how far have you developed with Boss? Have you?" He raised his 2 hands and hooked his thumbs together. Feng Ling understood. He was not just asking for a kiss, but a deeper question. She coughed lightly, looked at his gesture, and then looked down at the bowl in front of her. She didn't know how to answer. "Forget it. Let's drink." Seeing that she suddenly lowered her head and continued to drink without saying a word. The little woman was slightly embarrassed and didn't know how to answer. Her attitude was clear. Needless to say, their little Feng Ling had most likely been eaten by that wolf, Boss, without any bones left. TSK. If he had known that she was a woman, alas, what was the use of knowing? If he had known it earlier, he would have been crushed by Boss Lee like Xiao Fei and wouldn't have had a chance to get her. Whether he knew it earlier or later, the result was the same. They were just brothers. Kay sighed again. He sighed that he was saved by a 13-year-old girl in the jungle. The point was that this little girl was so handsome that he was won over. Otherwise, he wouldn't have taken the initiative to bring her back to the base. But speaking of which, if Boss Lee and Feng Ling really got together in the future, no matter what, he had to let Boss Lee have a good drink with him. At night, many brothers had returned to their small rooms to rest for the time being, but in case of emergencies, Most of them slept in their clothes. The wood under the fires in front of the camp crackled and popped. Kay's alcohol tolerance was very good, and he was a little dizzy. He watched Fong Ling drink 2 large bowls of wine. Li Nanheng walked out of the tent inside and happened to run into Kay, who was looking for a place to relieve himself. Kay opened his eyes in a daze and saw it was Boss. He immediately whispered, as if reporting, "Boss, Fong Ling has been drinking a lot these years, hasn't she? Her alcohol tolerance seems to be much better than when she was in the base." Li Nanheng glanced at him. "Yes, she's much better, but she's still very weak." "How much did she drink?" Kay raised his hand and gestured 2 big bowls. "Not too much, not too little, just 2 full bowls." If a man with average alcohol tolerance drank 2 full bowls of this kind of wine, he should be drunk by now, but she has been sitting there, her face is not red, and she is not out of breath. When she talked to me, she was still very sober and not drunk at all. In order to drink with her, I drank the whole jar. Now she doesn't seem to be drunk, boss. Well, I'm going to relieve myself, and then I'll come back and continue to drink with her. Not drunk yet. Yeah, he's not drunk yet. He's still sitting there waiting for me to go back, Kay said as he staggered back in a daze and pointed to Fong Ling and the public laptop placed outside. Look at her. She hasn't moved at all. Li Nanheng didn't respond and walked over. Seeing that Boss had gone over, Kay didn't continue to be long-winded, lest he talked too much with Boss here and aroused Fong Ling's suspicion. He hurriedly turned to the dense forest to find a place to relieve himself. Fong Ling was still sitting in front of the computer, and there was an empty bowl by her hand. Li Nanheng walked over and lowered his eyes to look at her. He saw that although she was sitting upright and staring at the computer screen, the standby power on the computer was running out. The power bar was flashing with a red light of 2%. She continued to stare at the computer screen as if nothing had happened. He approached, but she didn't seem to notice and was still staring at the screen. Li Nanheng's intuition told him something was wrong. He walked around her and looked at her again, only to see that her fingers seemed to be typing on the keyboard, but there was no page on the screen. She was typing in the air, which was obviously a little mechanical. Li Nanheng immediately understood something. He lowered his eyes to look at the little woman with a pair of round eyes, leaned down, and sat next to her. Fong Ling in. The woman in front of the computer responded. Her voice sounded like when she was chatting with Kay, not as harsh and cold as when she faced him during the day. Hearing her tone, Li Nanheng knew what was going on. He moved his chair closer to her and sat shoulder to shoulder with her. At the same time, he reached out to take the laptop on the small table in front of her, closed it, and put it aside. The computer beside Fong Ling's hand was gone. As if she didn't know what to do, she just sat there and turned to look at him in confusion. Looking at her blank eyes, Li Nanheng wanted to laugh, but he didn't laugh out loud. He just looked at her. How much did you drink? Fong Ling was stunned, but obediently answered, 2 bowls. Is it delicious? And it's delicious, Fong Ling answered seriously, and then suddenly thought for a moment and said, it's just a little spicy. It was rare to see Fong Ling sitting so obediently by the side and speaking so kindly. Li Nanheng found that he really liked her when she was drunk. For example, last time, because she drank too much, she pretended to be a man in the hotel, took off her pants, and dug around in her pants. She was as cute as she could be. He glanced at her hand on her lap, reached out to hold her hand gently, held it in his palm, and rubbed it gently and lovingly. After rubbing for a while, he felt that she had shown this obedient side in front of Kay just now. She was so calm and gentle now. Did she think he was Kay? The man's good mood suddenly turned gloomy. He suddenly held her hand and asked, Are you drunk? No. Very good. People who drank too much would never admit that they were drunk. Who am I? He asked directly. Fong Ling looked straight at him. Li Nanheng. Seeing that she recognized him and knew who was sitting next to her and holding her hand, the gloomy haze on the man's face was swept away by the sunshine again. He held her hand tightly again. Seeing her obedient look, he whispered in her ear. At this time, all kinds of tropical insects and ants are moving around outside, and there are a lot of mosquitoes. Coming with me to sleep? Okay? All right. Seeing that she was obedient, Li Nanheng took her little hand, stood up, and walked back. Kay came back from a distance and saw them, so he immediately slipped away. Was Feng Ling drunk too much? Did she drink too much? Did she drink too much? 4M. Chapter 1162. When Li Nanheng pulled Feng Ling back, he saw that the little woman didn't seem to be swaying when she walked and was no different from when she was sober. If she hadn't been particularly obedient, he would have suspected that she was not drunk at all. But with her temper, she would never agree to hold hands with him in public in the camp when she was sober, let alone be so calm to him after being provoked by him a few days ago. Before walking into the compartment in the tent, Li Nanheng held her little hand and asked as he walked, "Feng Ling, let me ask you a question." "Yes." "Do you like me?" "Yes." The expression on the man's face was a bit excited, and he was in a good mood. He held back his laughter, continued to pull her in, and continued to ask, "How much do you like me?" "I like you very much." "Have you ever had such feelings for other men?" "No." "Since you like me, why do you always hide from me? Can't you be nice to me?" "Because you're not a good thing." Li Nanheng turned to look at her with a jerk. If it weren't for the fact that Feng Ling was still walking with him obediently, he would have suspected that she was not drunk at all. Seeing that her eyes were still a bit dazed, Li Nanheng resisted the urge to knock her head and asked, "Why am I not a good thing? Do I not love you enough, or do I not love you enough?" Because of his sudden question, Feng Ling stopped in her tracks. She turned her eyes and looked at him seriously. Seeing that although her eyes were dazed, they were especially serious, Li Nanheng felt a bit guilty after being stared at by her for a while, so he simply continued to walk forward. Feng Ling also followed him. However, when they arrived at the door of her room, Li Nanheng was about to push the door open when Feng Ling suddenly said, "Boss, your room is over there." Li Nanheng turned to look at her. She was already so drunk, but she still knew where his room was. "Well, I'll send you in. I'll sit here for a while and then leave," he answered seriously. Feng Ling looked at him doubtfully, but it was clear that although she still had a doubtful expression, she had temporarily lost the ability to think. She just looked at him as though she was not sure if she should let him in. Li Nanheng was about to push the door open when Feng Ling said, "Boss, you can't go in." "Why can't I go in?" Li Nanheng raised his brows and turned to look at her. Feng Ling also answered seriously, "You just can't go in. You have to give me a reason." Feng Ling watched him for a long time before saying seriously, "If you enter my room, I'm afraid I won't be able to control myself." Can't control it? These words made Li Nanheng decisively turn the knob on her door and push the door open. There was a faint smile in his eyes, but his expression remained calm and serious. "What do you mean you can't control it?" "That's right." Feng Ling stared at his hand that had already pushed the door open, and her expression suddenly became conflicted. Then Li Nanheng pushed the door open and entered. She stood there for a moment before following him in. Earlier, she had said that she didn't want him to come in, but after she followed him in, she seemed to subconsciously close the door behind her. Seeing her habitual action, Li Nanheng glanced at her without batting an eyelid, stood in front of her, and said with an extremely pure expression and a very calm voice, "Feng Ling." Feng Ling raised her head to look at the man because he was standing very close to her and because of his height. The man bent down a whisper in front of her face. "What did you say just now? Can't control myself?" She didn't speak, but just looked at him. Seeing that she didn't move, the man didn't know whether she was embarrassed to say it or her mind was stuck. He felt that he had to cherish this moment and couldn't let her be stuck like this. He simply raised his hand and stretched out 2 fingers in front of her. "How many is this?" Feng Ling blinked blankly. 2. Just when Li Nanheng was about to say that she looked normal, the short-haired little woman in front of him suddenly took a step forward, approached him, and abruptly bit the 2 fingers he raised. Li Nanheng, it didn't hurt. She clearly didn't want to bite hard, but when she suddenly bit down lightly, the tip of her tongue inevitably brushed against her fingertips, which made his heart itch unbearably. Li Nanheng didn't pull his fingers out. He just watched her biting his fingers, and his voice became lower. "Are you so drunk?" "I'm not drunk," she insisted. "I'm not drunk." The man wanted to laugh, but didn't. Feng Ling's alcohol tolerance was indeed not ordinary. It seemed that even if he let her drink in the future, she could only drink in places where he was present. He definitely couldn't let others see her like this. After drinking too much, she didn't act crazy or rush to sleep. She just seemed to be in a state where her consciousness seemed to be outside the sky. She looked normal, but her normal consciousness had flown to nowhere. It was really too cute. He really couldn't let others see her like this. Otherwise, his little wife might not be able to hold it in. He couldn't let her bite his fingers anymore. Seeing her biting him with blurred eyes, the man felt the obvious change in his lower body. But after all, this was not a suitable place. Firstly, the sound insulation was not good. Secondly, right now Jinwan and Mo Jingxian situation was not clear, and he couldn't concentrate on doing those things at this time. Furthermore, her period should not be over yet, so he still had to endure it. Li Nanheng suddenly put down his hand. Feng Ling's mouth was empty, but she didn't react much. She just looked at him with some regret as he instinctively took a step back. She blinked and then said as if she had been wronged, "Boss Li, am I particularly fierce?" At least he knew his place. Li Nanheng raised his eyebrows. "No, you're not fierce. You're particularly cute." Feng Ling looked confused. "How am I cute?" In the end, Li Nanheng couldn't help but raise his hand and pinch her cheek. "You're always cute. Except for you, I'm 80% sure I'll never look at any other woman in this life." Feng Ling looked at him blankly. Oh what?" The man then glanced around her room. There was no bathroom like the one in the hotel. If she wanted to pretend to be a man and go to the bathroom while standing, he probably wouldn't be able to fulfill her wish. However, just as the man was curious about what she would do after drinking too much this time, the woman in front of him suddenly stepped forward half an inch and directly pressed into his arms. The moment the man lowered his head to look at her, she suddenly tiptoed and pressed a kiss on his lips. Li Nanheng didn't move. His nose was filled with the woman's wine fragrance. At first, there was a moment of surprise in his eyes, but he concealed it perfectly. He only looked at the woman who suddenly took the initiative to kiss him. Chapter 1163. Very soft, very hot, very tempted. The kiss was over. Or rather, Feng Ling only pressed a kiss on his lips. After a while, she moved away and stepped back a little. The man resisted the urge to pull her back into his arms. As though he was afraid of scaring her, he lowered his eyes and said softly, "Is this what you mean by you can't control yourself?" Feng Ling blinked again, and then nodded seriously. The man could no longer hide the smile on his face. "You like me very much, and?" Feng Ling answered honestly, "And." This time, she even nodded, as though giving a very accurate affirmation. "Then don't control yourself." The man curved his lips. Feng Ling looked at him for a while, and suddenly raised her hand to cover her eyes shyly. She abruptly turned her back. "No, I'm shy." Li Nanheng looked at Feng Ling, who was suddenly so shy. "Why are you shy? Your man is right in front of you. Besides, you've even slept with him. It's not like we're talking about feelings between children. Just say what you want to say and do what you want to do. Show me your courage to go into battle." The man poked her slender shoulder and began to patiently guide her. Feng Ling seemed to believe his words. She put down her hand that was covering her eyes and hesitantly turned to look at him. Seeing that she had turned around, the man sat on the only bed in her small room that occupied a relatively large space. He casually stretched out his long legs and raised his arms to the sides. He gave her a look. "Come, do what you want to do." However, Feng Ling stood there and did not move for a long time. Li Nanheng raised his brows and continued to spread his arms. "Not coming?" At this time, Feng Ling suddenly raised her hand, gently scratched her chin, and then raised her hand to gently scratch the place under her ear connected to her neck. At this time, Li Nanheng remembered that they were used to taking a bath every day, but in this temporary camp, even if there was sufficient water, Feng Ling could not casually go to the Tunnel Sap Lake to take a bath. There were no convenient facilities for taking a bath here. For the past 2 days, she had been wiping herself in the room with the door closed before going to bed. She hadn't wiped herself today and had been pestered by Kay to drink outside. This place was too stuffy, and there was no air conditioning in the small room. There was only a fan that could temporarily cool her down, but at this moment, the fan was not turned on. She must be a little uncomfortable because of the heat. Although he still wanted to guide her patiently, he couldn't just watch her sleep like this after drinking too much. He was afraid that she wouldn't be able to sleep comfortably. Li Nanheng sighed and patted the bed beside him. "Come here and sit down." Feng Ling looked at him for a while, walked over, and sat down obediently. Li Nanheng got up and went out, spent a few minutes to get water, and then found the towel she used in her room. He washed it, wrung it out, and came back. He wiped her face that was a little red, and then wiped her neck that she had just scratched, helping her to wipe away the sweat around her neck. Then he leaned down to look at her, raised a finger, and gently hooked her chin, a little flirting and a little wanting her to continue her uncontrollable actions just now. "Do you feel better?" Feng Ling nodded, sat there comfortably, and closed her eyes, waiting for him to continue wiping for her. Li Nanheng, she really didn't know how hard it was for a man to sit here like this and let him do whatever he wanted. No matter what he did, she wouldn't resist. He took her hand and wiped her exposed arms and hands. Then he tugged down the collar of her wide t-shirt. He saw that she was wearing a tight, black camisole and didn't expose too much of her body. The man resisted the urge to take off her t-shirt and patiently wiped her collarbone and shoulders. He watched her as he wiped. At this moment, Feng Ling had already opened her eyes again, but not completely. She was comfortably narrowing her eyes to look at him. After wiping all the parts that could be wiped, Li Nanheng felt that there was really no way to take off her pants. If he really took them off, he would be the crazy one. He could only do this. He threw the towel back into the basin and looked down at her. "Done. Do you want to sleep, or do you want to do something?" "I want to drink water." "Wait." Li Nanheng looked back at the table beside her bed. There was a kettle and a glass of water commonly used in the camp. He turned and walked over to pour a glass of water. To prevent dust from gathering in this kind of place, he simply rinsed the glass with water, poured more than half a glass, and handed the glass to her. "Drink it." Feng Ling took the water and drank it without saying thank you. After drinking a few mouthfuls, she obediently returned the empty glass to him. She was really too obedient. Although he couldn't do anything to her, Li Nanheng was really unwilling to let her go. He simply sat down next to her, raised his arm, and put it around the shoulders of the little woman who was rarely obedient. He looked at her and said with a smile, "Feng Ling, will you do whatever I ask you to do now?" Feng Ling seemed to be stunned for a moment and seemed to be analyzing the meaning of his words. After a few seconds, she said, "And then I'll ask you something. Answer me seriously." "All right." Li Nanheng, after that night at Rogers Pass, why didn't you tell me for so long? Feng Ling, I'm a little flustered. I don't know how to tell you. A little flustered? He thought she was so cold-hearted that she didn't need him to take responsibility. It was clearly her first time, and a few days ago, she said that it didn't matter to him that she had slept with him. So it turned out that she was flustered and afraid, but she just hid it in this cold and hard shell and refused to say it out. Li Nanheng smiled and patted her shoulder and then looked at her sideways. "If someone else dared to treat you like that, what would you do?" Feng Ling did not hesitate and looked straight at him. "Except for you, no one else has a chance to treat me like that." Li Nanheng, am I a very special one in your heart? Feng Ling, yes. Li Nanheng's smile almost reached his ears, but he still looked serious, feeling that it was too shameless of him to ask her what was on her mind. He'd better ask something normal. "Why don't you want to go back to the base?" he asked. Chapter 1164. Even if Boss has helped me regain the face I once lost, I don't want to break so many rules. Even if there are many people who welcome me back, there are still different voices. I don't want to affect the balance of the entire base because of me. I also don't want Boss Lee to be pressured and threatened by the outside world because of me. I'm fine outside. Returning to the base is not my only choice. Li Nanheng nodded. "Boss Lee, you're right. Indeed. When she was kicked out of the base 3 years ago, perhaps the base was the only thing she could rely on. But she was not the kind of person who was so weak and helpless that she couldn't open up a new life. In the past few years, she had been living a good life outside. She was free, and there was nothing bad about it. The documents in the base were also there. If one day she was tired outside and wanted to go back, she could go back at any time. Or like now, if there was anything she could do, she would fight side by side with the brothers in the base. There was not much difference from before. The only difference was that she was freer than before. Her choice was understandable and very rational. Li Nanheng asked again, "When did you know that you were related to the Feng family?" This time, Feng Ling paused for a moment before answering, "Because of the piece of jade that I always wore on my body when I was young. One time I found it. I only vaguely felt some connection, but I didn't want to investigate the truth. I don't really care about this." It could be seen that she really didn't care. "If you're really the daughter of the Feng family, do you want to go back?" "No, Li Nanheng." "Because what?" "Feng Ling. I don't like Feng Mingzhu." His answer was really straightforward. It would have been better if he had said this earlier. Why do you have to be so cold and awkward as usual? Li Nanheng smiled and raised his hand to rub her soft hair. "It's up to you whether you want to go back or not. No one will force you. As for Feng Mingzhu, you don't have to worry too much. With me around, she can't cause any trouble. No matter where she is, you have me to support you." And Feng Ling blinked and suddenly imitated him to rub her hair. She raised her hand and touched his head a few times. Li Nanheng, although he still wanted to ask some serious questions, he couldn't help but ask the first one. "You didn't let me in just now. Were you afraid that you couldn't control something?" Feng Ling didn't answer for a while, but looked at him with a burning gaze. Li Nanheng raised his eyebrows. "Then I'll allow you to sleep." She was probably really sleepy. She stared at his eyes for a while and said, "I'm afraid that I like you too much and can't control myself." Li Nanheng raised his eyebrows. "Then like it. No one will stop you." Feng Ling, I still want to kiss you." Li Nanheng continued to raise his eyebrows higher and higher. "Then kiss me. I can't ask for more." Feng Ling, "I still want to bring you back to the wolf's den and let you sleep by my side." Li Nanheng wanted to laugh, but he suddenly lowered his eyebrows and smiled as he held Feng Ling in his arms. He lowered his head and kissed her on the forehead, as expected of a little wolf girl raised by wolves. She had been influenced too much before she was 5 years old. She subconsciously wanted to bring the things she liked back to the den and make them her own. However, she clearly didn't dare to do so. She was extremely timid. "What else do you want?" The man hugged her and lowered his head to look into her eyes. As he kissed her lips, his voice changed. He asked hoarsely, "Do you want it?" This so-called want was indeed what it meant. He already wanted to kiss her and bring her back to the wolf's den. He might as well ask directly. Feng Ling didn't hesitate. She allowed him to hold her and looked at him with incomparable sincerity. "Yes." The man's eyes instantly deepened. His voice also became hoarse. He pressed his lips against hers and said, "What do you want?" "I want you." Although it was indeed the answer he wanted to hear, Li Nanheng suddenly felt a little regretful when she suddenly said it in this kind of atmosphere. He tightly held the woman in his arms, who was still on her menstrual cycle and in this small room with poor soundproofing in the camp. He buried his face in her neck and kissed her again and again. He asked about the faint and fresh scent on her body again and again, but he could not resolve this terrible desire that could kill him. He kissed a shallow hickey on her neck and then hugged her. He almost pressed her into his body and said in an unusually hoarse voice, "Little Feng Ling, I really want my life." He knew that if they continued to kiss and hug like this, he would really die on the spot from suffocation, but he couldn't bully her at this time. Moreover, even if she helped him with this broken place, he wouldn't be able to clean himself up now that he had to go out at the last minute. It wasn't a suitable place to do anything. Li Nanheng resisted the urge and put the little woman in his arms, who was as obedient as a cat on the bed. "All right, go to sleep." Just as he helped her tuck in the quilt and was about to get up, Feng Ling suddenly raised her hand and grabbed his hand. "Boss, sleep with me." Li Nanheng, he looked down at the state of his lower body. He really King felt that he had shot himself in the foot. Why did he make her so drunk and torture himself like this? There was still a hard battle to fight tomorrow. Who could bear being teased like this? I'll go out first. I'll be back in a while. You sleep first. Li Nanheng just wanted to go out and find a place where there was no one to solve the problem by himself before coming back. However, Feng Ling held his hand and didn't let go. She didn't speak and just stared at him as if she wouldn't say anything even if he really left now. But there would definitely be disappointment in her eyes. Li Nanheng looked at her for a while. A few minutes later, he was defeated and could only lie down. After all, Feng Ling, who was so obedient and willing to take off her underwear, was just a flash in the pan. When she sobered up, who knew how she would roll her eyes at him? He couldn't bear to do it, so he just endured it. However, as soon as he lay down, Feng Ling turned over on the bed and took the initiative to lean against his arms to hug him. At the same time, her eyes seemed to notice the obvious place on his lower body and immediately looked at him in surprise. Being stared at by her eyes, even if she really didn't react or do anything, Li Nanheng's temples instantly twitched and the blue veins on his forehead popped out. He directly pulled the quilt over his body, but it was obvious that the thin summer quilt was useless and had no effect on covering him. Chapter 1165. It really couldn't be covered at all. Li Nanheng lay on the bed with a headache, panting heavily. He just wanted Feng Ling to fall asleep as soon as possible so that he could go out and find a solution after she fell asleep. However, the little woman lying beside him rubbed her head against his chest, still staring at the obvious place under the quilt. "What are you looking at? Hurry up and go to sleep." The man's voice was hoarse, and he raised his hand to cover her eyes. "Go to sleep." Her vision was suddenly blocked. Feng Ling was stunned for a moment, and then she raised her hand to pull his hand down. "Boss, don't cover my eyes." "Then close your eyes." "Boss, what's wrong there?" Li Nanheng closed his eyes. At this moment, even the veins on the side of his neck were about to bulge. He forcefully pushed the little woman in his arms to the side, keeping her lying obediently by his side. "It's nothing. Be good. Go to sleep." After a moment of silence, Feng Ling finally didn't continue to speak, but she still lay on her side and looked at him. She no longer looked at his lower body, but she raised her eyes to stare at his face. Li Nanheng closed his eyes and ignored her, thinking that she had fallen asleep. Countless times in his heart, he wondered if there was anything that had a great impact on him. He wanted to find something to torture his mental state and take this opportunity to relieve the swelling pain down there. However, after thinking for a long time, what came to his mind was the scene that 3 years ago, Feng Ling was thrown in front of the base hall by a group of people, lying on the ground, scolded coldly by for Mr. Li, and pointed at by everyone. All the things that belonged to her were thrown on the ground around her. She was in a sorry state, but secretly gritted her teeth and did not shed a single tear. In the end, she was driven out of the base in a sorry state. After thinking about it for a long time, the biggest blow to him in recent years turned out to be that Feng Ling was driven out of the base alone. What was the reason? He clearly had the ability to not let her suffer that kind of harm. He clearly could have rushed back to protect her in his arms, not letting anyone spy on her, and not letting anyone point at her, but he was not there at that time. The scenes in his mind not only did not divert Li Nanheng's attention, but his lower body did not show any signs of slowing down at all. It even made him want to hold the woman next to him tightly in his arms. He couldn't hold her. He had to endure it. Li Nanheng's eyes were still closed. Feng Ling lay by his side and did not close her eyes. She just looked at him and suddenly raised her hand. Her warm and soft fingers gently touched his lips. The man suddenly trembled and turned to look at her. His voice was so hoarse that he wondered if it was his own voice. "What are you doing?" Feng Ling abruptly sat up, searched her body for a while, and suddenly turned over to ride on him. Li Nanheng. He even looked at the little woman who suddenly rode on him in horror. She said she was riding, but in fact, she just stepped over it. Then, she stretched her arms and found the coat she was wearing on the simple table beside the bed. She rummaged through the coat pockets and took out a wallet. Then, she took out 2 bank cards. Li Nanheng was about to collapse. He silently counted down in his heart. If she still didn't go down, no matter if it was her period or if the soundproofing here was good, he would never let her go. Just as he counted from 10 to 6 in his heart, Feng Ling got off him and lay back by his side. Suddenly, she raised the 2 bank cards in her hand to him. Li Nanheng, who had just finished counting in his heart, was still in a state of half disappointment and half relief. When he suddenly saw the card she handed to him, he didn't react. "What is this?" "Feng Ling, it's for you. It's mine." Li Nanheng looked at the 2 cards. "Why did you give your card to me?" "Feng Ling, boss, you've always been in charge of my card and even took the time to help me manage my money. This is the money I've saved in the past 3 years. Boss, continue to help me manage it." Li Nanheng, seeing that he didn't move, Feng Ling grabbed his hand on the quilt and stuffed the card into his hand. "Take it." Li Nanheng held the 2 cards and looked at the little woman lying beside him. Although she was drunk, her eyes were clear and serious. "Why did you give it to me?" She had lived outside for several years and had learned how to live and how to manage her own money, hadn't she? "Feng Ling, because this is all I have." Li Nanheng, "Feng Ling, take it. Don't lose it." With that, she stuffed the card in his hand into his palm and then whispered in his ear, "There are more than 200,000 yuan in it." It was probably her so-called all of her that had stimulated the man. Li Nanheng was speechless for a long time. As the heir of the Li family, the boss of 11 Base, and the leader of the underground arms trade in the United States, he had more than 10 billion yuan behind him. But at this moment, he felt that the bank card in his hand with more than 200,000 yuan was heavy, as if it was the most important thing. He carefully clenched it. He couldn't listen to her anymore. Otherwise, it would be difficult for him to restrain himself. He closed his eyes and pretended to be asleep, wanting her to be obedient and quiet down. However, Feng Ling, who usually spoke very little and would only reply to others word by word, was suddenly so agitated that it made people anxious. "Boss, go to sleep. Boss, sleep. Boss," Li Nanheng couldn't bear it anymore. He suddenly turned over and pressed her under his body. His red eyes hid the man's excessive restraint and forbearance. "If you don't sleep now, even if you are on your period, I have 100 ways to make you unable to sleep. Shut up and sleep." Feng Ling. She stared at him blankly as if she understood something from his words, but also as if she didn't understand. Facing her eyes, Li Nanheng felt as if he was being fried in a pan of oil. He released her anxiously and was about to get up to leave. He really couldn't stay any longer. He had just propped up his arms on both sides of her body when suddenly, as if afraid that he would leave, Feng Ling raised her hands and wrapped them around his neck, pulling him down hard. Caught off guard, Li Nanheng fell back and hit her lips hard. More importantly, she took the initiative to raise her head and catch his kiss. She didn't know how to respond, but she still took the initiative to hold his neck and refused to let go. Li Nanheng did not move. He looked at the woman under him and saw that her eyes were wide open as though she was half awake and half intoxicated, but her eyes reflected his face. It was him, only him. Pitter-patter. The last string of reason in his mind was broken. 4M. Chapter 1166. Li Nanheng went crazy and pulled her hand down. When Feng Ling's hand instinctively shrank back because of the heat, he gasped. "You provoked me. If you don't vent your anger, don't even think about sleeping tonight." With that, the man leaned down and kissed her hard. This kiss, this urge that had been ruthlessly aroused, was uncontrollable. He didn't know if it was Feng Ling who gradually took the initiative to move his hand up and down, or if it was Li Nanheng who seduced her step by step and kissed her, teaching her how to make him more comfortable. When Feng Ling no longer needed his hand to hold her down, he had already held the woman tightly in his arms, hugging her, kissing her, and their lips and teeth were entangled. His mind was filled with thoughts. Just now, his rationality had been completely depleted. If it wasn't for the fact that his hand had touched the cushion on her when he reached down and regained his rationality by a fraction of a second, he might have done anything now. Suddenly, the man snorted, parted his lips, and scolded hoarsely. "Why are you still biting me at this time?" In response to his dissatisfaction, Feng Ling's answer was that her hand didn't stop moving but bit his chin again. Right now, Li Nanheng couldn't stand her seduction at all. He directly pulled her hand away, lowered his head, and bit her lips hard. As he kissed, his saliva tangled and unclear sounds came from their lips. Vaguely, she could only hear a few vague words. I won't be able to get out of bed for 3 days and 3 nights when I go back. You vixen, do you want to kill me? Feng Ling woke up in an urgent whistle. When she woke up, she was still a little confused and didn't know where she was for a moment. When her vision became clear and she saw that she was in her own compartment in the tent, she suddenly remembered and sat up. Because of the urgent whistle, she guessed that something big was going to happen or there was an urgent matter that needed to be gathered, so she quickly got up to change clothes and went out. However, when she was about to get out of bed, she suddenly paused and looked down at her clothes. The loose t-shirt didn't seem to change, but why didn't she remember how she came back last night? At first, it was Kay who asked her out for a drink. Then what? She was about to reach for her phone to see what time it was, but the moment her hand touched the phone, she suddenly felt sore. Not to mention her hand, even her wrist was sore. That feeling was just like when she was in the base. Nanheng would drag her out to do devil training at night, and she would stand on the shooting range holding a gun all night. She felt that her 5 fingers were sore and stiff, and she couldn't move them anymore. She clenched her fists back and forth. She couldn't remember what had happened, but she seemed to have held a gun in her dream last night. There seemed to be something wrong with the gun's handle. It was terribly hot, but she still held it for a long time. If it was a dream, then why was her hand so sore? The urgent whistle sounded again and again. Without thinking too much, she picked up her cell phone and took a look at it. Then she pulled up the black uniform, quickly put it on, and rushed out. When she rushed out of the tent, she saw that many people were ready to go. She heard several acquaintances muttering as they ran outside. It seemed that there was a situation in the dense forest. In addition, the American police had arrived early. In order to get Jinwan and Mo Jingxin out of danger in time, they immediately organized an emergency rescue team. But it was not early. The original plan was to go at noon, but it was almost 9 o'clock in the morning. She didn't expect that she would sleep so late. She must have drunk too much last night, but she didn't know if she was drunk in front of Kay or if she was particularly embarrassing. At this time, Kay came over and stood in a row with her. After the sniper team drill master assigned them weapons, he threw a new sniper rifle to Feng Ling and gave her a look of approval. He believed that even if she hadn't returned to the team for training in the past few years, with all her previous achievements, she would definitely be able to snipe from a distance. Feng Ling held the gun steadily and nodded to the drill master. At the same time, she adjusted the angle of the gun in her hand and checked everywhere. After confirming that there were no bullets in the gun, she carried the gun on her back, retracted her hand, and subconsciously lowered her head to look at her hand. Why did her wrist and hand still feel sore? Boss! Boss Li! When Li Nanheng's figure appeared in everyone's sight, Feng Ling also turned her head to look at him, but her eyes were cold and emotionless. She glanced at the man's face lightly, then retracted her gaze, lowered her head with a straight face, and tightened the belt under her combat uniform. Li Nanheng seemed to inadvertently glance at Feng Ling standing in the crowd. Because she lowered her head to adjust her belt, she couldn't meet his eyes, but the man's gaze swept in her direction wantonly. And then he withdrew his gaze in time before others noticed anything fishy and coldly ordered everyone to prepare to board the plane and go to rescue. Feng Ling also boarded the plane with everyone. They had been stationed here for several days, and now they suddenly ordered the team to go to the rescue, which meant that they must have made sufficient preparations. But the helicopter she boarded was the same one as Kay's, and Li Nanheng, the rescue team of the American police, and the commanding army were in the front. Separated by the plane, even if she could hear everyone's conversation through the headphones, she could also speak at this time, but she didn't open her mouth the whole time. She only listened to Li Nanheng's cold and serious voice and did everything according to his instructions. After successfully flying into the center of the dense forest, everyone looked at a fixed electronic device in the cabin, on which various red dots showed the famous positions and the explosive range of the buried mines. Those were the points they needed to pay attention to. And then the position in the middle circled with bright yellow was the area where Akib and Dolly were currently active. After confirming the target range of the helicopters in front and the position of the helicopters behind, everyone only said into the headphones, "Roger." Feng Ling also said. Her voice was very soft, but on the plane in front, Lin Nanheng, who was on the other end of the headphones, still heard her voice among the nearly 100 people. In the headphones, she still had a cold voice that kept people thousands of miles away, but it was very recognizable among the men's voices. 4M. Chapter 1167. Although Dolly and Akib were well prepared, and the artillery fire from below was frequent, since 11 bays could rush in at this time, they must have designed a flight route. They avoided all the attacks and landed smoothly. All the members got off the helicopter with guns and started a fierce battle in this dense forest. After fighting for a while, Feng Ling was suddenly dragged aside by Tam and winked at her. "Hurry up and find Mrs. Mo and Mr. Mo. We'll take care of them." Mr. Mo would be fine. What she was afraid of was Mrs. Mo. Feng Ling nodded and stopped fighting. She got on the helicopter behind and began to search around with 2 members of the American police. After searching for a long time, she remembered that Mr. Mo. had agreed with 11 base on the position signal. No matter when, the rendezvous point would be in the west. She didn't know if Mrs. Mo. had already met with Mr. Mo., so she asked the American police to drive the helicopter west. Sure enough, in a slightly safer area near the dense forest minefield in the west, she vaguely saw Jean Wan standing behind a tree. "Stop, land here!" Feng Ling shouted. When the helicopter landed smoothly, the police got off the helicopter first for fear of making any mistakes. Feng Ling also quickly got off the helicopter and went straight to Jean Wan. "Mrs. Mo." It sounded like Jean Wan was explaining her identity to the 2 American policemen. Feng Ling directly came forward to prove that she was on their side. The 2 policemen finally shut their mouths and did not continue interrogating Jean Wan. Feng Ling quickly stepped forward and grabbed Jean Wan's hand. "How are you?" "I'm sorry. We're late. We've been waiting for this batch of helicopters to rescue us. After all, the ambush here is very deep. If we don't make thorough preparations, we are likely to fail. But in the past 2 days, you must have suffered a lot." Before Feng Ling finished speaking, she looked at Jean Wan's pale face and bloody mouth and knew that she must have experienced a thrilling experience before this. She lowered her head and saw the back of Jean Wan's hand. Her heart trembled. How could her hand be hurt like this? It was a burn. Without asking more questions, Feng Ling took Jean Wan back to the helicopter. After getting in and making sure it was safe, she asked, "How did your hand get hurt like this?" "There's a medicine box on the plane. I'll help you deal with it. I'm fine." Jean Wan was taken into the helicopter. She finally relaxed a little, but not completely. She turned to look out of the cabin in the direction that Mo Jingshan had just left and asked, "Where is Mo Jingshan?" Before Feng Ling flew over, she had been observing the situation on the ground. She did see Mr. Mo passing by unscathed and had already met up with the people in front. "Mr. Mo is going to meet up with boss now. Don't worry, their plane is right in front, and the situation in front is under control." The minefields in this dense forest are likely to be detonated by those people. You're pregnant, so you can't smell the gunpowder. It's easy to hurt the baby. Come with me now. Although she didn't want to be separated from Mo Jingshin, she still sat in the helicopter obediently for the sake of the baby. Seeing Jean Wan's current state, although she wasn't covered in wounds, she definitely wasn't in a good state. Although she wanted to ask her what she had experienced these days, she looked very tired and didn't want to talk too much, so Feng Ling didn't ask much. Anyway, it was good to make sure she was safe. However, Jean Wan was in the helicopter. As the plane took off and landed very fast, she couldn't stand it. Her morning sickness worsened, so she ran into the bathroom in the cabin and vomited for a long time. In the end, Jean Wan was helplessly helped out by Feng Ling sitting in the cabin. Feng Ling took a soft electric and put it on her back. Can you hold on? This helicopter is specially here to pick you up. I'll send you out right now. You'll feel much better after landing. Just bear with it. I'm fine. It's just morning sickness. I'm not sick, Jean Wan said weakly. You don't have to send me out first. I'll wait for them with you. Feng Ling looked at her and didn't speak. She just helped her treat the wound on the back of her hand. Although she knew Jean Wan was very tired, the burn on her hand was really terrible, so she asked, Is this a burn? Why is it so hot? I did it on purpose. They asked me to send him food and set up a trap. Whether he eats or not, it's the worst result. In order to prevent him from facing this choice, I spilled the whole pot of boiling soup on my hand, Feng Ling said in a low voice. Feng Ling paused and frowned. She had been in the base for a long time and was surrounded by men. In the years she lived outside, most of the women she knew were ordinary women who didn't have particularly good self-defense skills. It was more accurate to say that they didn't even have the strength to truss a chicken. But she had never seen someone like Jean Wan. She didn't have any martial arts skills, was just a simple and pure woman, and was even pregnant. But in her bones, there was a yearning for life and faith in life, as if there was a light persistent and bright. Maybe you should let Mr. Mo make the choice. He must have a way to protect himself without hurting you, Feng Ling said. Jean Wan was silent for a moment. Yes, if I throw this problem to him, he may deal with it very carefully, but I didn't think so much at that time. So, I used the stupidest method. This is not a stupidest method. This may be a deep love. You'd rather be covered with scars than let the other party suffer any difficulties. Mrs. Mo, you've done a good job. When Feng Ling said this, she wrapped the gauze around her hand and suddenly remembered that in the Boston jungle, Lin Nanheng was so injured that he couldn't even stand steadily, and even his breathing was irregular. However, when she was almost killed by those people, he still stood behind them with a gun like a god. He opened fire to help her. He stood there covered in wounds and didn't let her suffer any more injuries. Feng Ling had never figured out how Lin Nanheng could still stand in that situation. How'd he do it? At this moment, such a sentence suddenly burst out of her mouth. When she tied the gauze on the back of Jean Wan's hand, she couldn't help but tighten her hands, as if there was an answer in her mind. Lin Nanheng's feelings for her were not limited to liking her, right? Or even love. Thinking of this word, Feng Ling's heart skipped a beat. 4M. Chapter 1168. Due to Jean Wan's insistence, the plane took off and landing in a safe spot in the middle of the dense forest. Seeing that Jean Wan was very tired, Feng Ling took care of her for a while and allowed her to rest in the cabin. Seeing that Jean Wan had fallen asleep, Feng Ling watched over her by the side. The sky gradually darkened. Mr. Mo came over. Feng Ling saw that Jean Wan had also woken up. After reminding her, she walked out, leaving the space for the two of them. The two of them had just been through a great calamity and survived a desperate situation. They must have a lot to talk about. It was really inappropriate for her to be here. After leaving the cabin, Feng Ling had been guarding outside the plane. From time to time, she would look at the fire and flashlight near the wooden houses not far away. Occasionally, when she heard some strange movements, she would subconsciously grip the gun behind her and look around coldly. After confirming that there were no problems, she retracted her hand and continued to quietly lay by her side. However, her fingers still paused slightly. Ever since she woke up this morning, there had been a strange feeling in her palm. That feeling was very strange. She lowered her head to look at her hand and felt that there was nothing special. She touched it with her hand and found that it was not hot. In the darkness of the night, the sounds of insects and birds chirping could be heard. Feng Ling placed her hand down and quietly guarded outside the plane. Not long after, Officer Int suddenly sent someone over. Feng Ling then turned back to the cabin. The moment she entered, she abruptly saw that Mr. Mo had already taken off his blood-stained shirt. With just a quick glance, Feng Ling very consciously and decisively took a step back. She did not enter, but stood outside to say, "Mr. Mo, Officer Ince, who is in charge of the American police this time, is looking for you." "Got it," Mo Jingshin replied mildly. After a while, Mr. Mo had put on his clothes again. He was still wearing the blood-stained black shirt, but Jin Wan had helped him deal with the wound. Although the man's face seemed to be seriously injured, Mo Jingshin and Li Nanheng were actually the same kind of people. They both had high self-control and forbearance. No matter how serious and painful the injury was, they would not show any pain on their faces. He just walked out with indifferent eyes, as if the wound on his body were not his. Seeing that Mo Jingshin had left, Jin Wan was worried and was about to come out. Feng Ling couldn't let anything happen to her now, so she rushed over and blocked the cabin door. "Mrs. Mo, rest inside. Don't come out." Jin Wan could only shrink her head back. After saying a few words to the two police officers outside, Feng Ling re-entered the plane. "Not going to sleep?" Seeing Jin Wan still sitting there, she asked. Jin Wan leaned against the wall. "Feng Ling, I feel like I'm watching a movie these days." Feng Ling smiled. "How can I see my hands covered in wounds while watching a movie? At least he survived, didn't he? At least Mo Jingshin is safe." "That's true," Feng Ling said lightly. "I've been on missions in the base these years and seen too many deaths. Being alive is indeed more important than anything else." Jin Wan smiled as if she didn't want to talk about such a heavy topic in advance. However, because she knew that Li Nanheng and Feng Ling came to rescue together, she suddenly teased her about Li Nanheng. Then Jin Wan mentioned the contraceptive pill in T-City last time. Feng Ling recalled the scene when Li Nanheng angrily pressed her against the door and bit her for a long time because of that contraceptive pill and said, "Forget it." Jin Wan smiled. "I'm really curious about how you and Nanheng got along. You used to be brothers. What's the meaning of this?" Feng Ling was expressionless. "Now we're still brothers." "Really?" Jin Wan smiled. "Why do I feel that you treat him as a brother, but he treats you as his woman?" Feng Ling coughed and subconsciously changed the topic. "Mrs. Mo, your hand was wet just now, wasn't it? And why don't I disinfect your hand again?" "Forget it. It hurts." Jin Wan put her hand behind her back. But Jin Wan clearly felt Feng Ling's indifferent character. Although she didn't know what Feng Ling was like when she was in the United States, at least after meeting Feng Ling in High City, she found that as long as Li Nanheng was mentioned in front of her, she could only maintain her composure on the surface. But in fact, she could see that she was a little irritable. Except for Li Nanheng, there seemed to be no one else who could make Feng Ling irritable. The matter in the jungle came to an end for the time being. On the way back, Jin Wan and Mr. Mo were in this plane. Feng Ling was supposed to accompany and take care of them dutifully. After all, the two of them were injured, and when they were in High City, she had long been used to seeing them show off their affection every day. It didn't matter if she was a third wheel for a while. Anyway, as soon as they landed on the ground and returned to the camp, she would immediately disappear. But just before the plane was about to take off, as soon as she put on the headphones in the cabin, she heard Li Nanheng's voice. "Feng Ling, come a plane one." Jin Wan and Mo Jingshin didn't wear headphones, so of course they didn't hear it. Feng Ling turned her eyes to the two people who were still sitting there hand in hand and didn't know what they were talking about. Then she looked at the member of the police rescue team in the driver's seat. Before she spoke, she heard Li Nanheng's voice in the headphones again. "Don't dawdle. I'll give you 1 minute to arrive at plane one." She didn't know why he suddenly ordered her to go there, but now even if she left, there shouldn't be any danger approaching Jin Wan. So she put down the headphones and got off the plane. She quickly walked to the plane one where Li Nanheng took. As soon as she walked over, the cabin door suddenly opened. Looking at the open door, she stepped up. As soon as she entered, she saw that this plane one was obviously livelier than the ones behind it. Li Nanheng, Kay, and the others were all here, including the commander of the rescue team sent by China and officer Ince from the United States. This helicopter was very large and could accommodate at least 17 or 18 people. Right now, there were 7 or 8 people in it. It didn't look crowded, but it was indeed very lively. Feng Ling didn't understand why she was suddenly called here. After entering, someone came over to help her close the cabin door behind her. Li Nanheng was talking to Officer Ince. Hearing that she came, he turned to look at her and saw that she was standing there motionlessly. Why are you standing there? We're about to take off. Aren't you afraid of falling? Come and sit down. With that, the man casually patted the seat beside him. Feng Ling looked at the others, walked over, and sat down in the seat he had just patted. When she sat down, she turned to look at Li Nanheng. When the man noticed her gaze, he lowered his eyes to look at her. Their eyes met. Although Feng Ling didn't speak, it was clear that there was a question in her eyes. Why did he call her to plane one? Farem, you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.